Chapter 657. The broken ground was filled with cracks that were as deep as an abyss. They were so deep that it seemed as if they would swallow anyone whole. It also seemed as if demons from hell would crawl out at any time. The air was scorching hot, as if it was about to be ignited. It was extremely hot. The grass and some low shrubs had long been burned to ashes by the high temperature at the beginning of the battle, leaving the place bare. After another exchange, the thorny calamity crocodile's huge body staggered back, leaving huge cracks along the way. However, Fod, who had the advantage, did not need to frown. He did not pounce on the thorny calamity crocodile again. He attacked Grey Fergus one after another, but they were all blocked by the thorny calamity crocodile. The thorny calamity crocodile's strong body was like an iron wall. At every critical moment, it protected Grey Fergus. Although he knew that Grey Fergus was the thorny calamity crocodile's weakness, he could not attack Grey Fergus. The thorny calamity crocodile, who was controlled by the ability to control corpses, was only left with its battle instincts. Logically speaking, it should not be too difficult to avoid Grey Fergus, who was on its back. A feint should be enough. However, with Grey Fergus's control, it was as if a disaster-level blood fiend had a human soul. It easily saw through his feint and did not fall for it at all. Moreover, the other party's control of the thorny calamity crocodile was as if it was controlling its own body. It avoided his attacks from its blind spots several times. He even suspected that the other party could see his movements through the thorny calamity crocodile's eyes. A person with two pairs of eyes. The truth was as such. Grey discovered by chance that he could already share his vision with the corpse controller. He could use the corpse controller's eyes to see things. He guessed that this should be an ability derived from the evolution of the ghost ability and the corpse controller ability. Humph! Fod snorted. He was embarrassed that he could not even take down a little guy who had reached the destruction realm with the help of the corpse controller. Although the Leopold family was at the bottom of the top family, it was still a top family. If he could not take down the other party today, the Leopold family would lose all their face. It would be difficult for them to raise their heads among the top families in the future. Thinking of this, his eyes became even colder, as if there were stars twinkling in them. Buzz! A sudden change occurred. A blurry shadow appeared behind him. Its shape was not fixed, and it rapidly evolved between various weapons. That was right. It was a blood skill, and a very high-level one at that. His opponent was an annihilation class, but his combat power was still enhanced. One could imagine how high the level of this blood skill was. The crimson flames on the giant blade disappeared and were replaced by an even larger giant blade. The giant blade that was originally several meters long had now become more than 10 meters long. Moreover, the edge of the blade had also become wider. The widest part of the blade had even exceeded 1 meter. The giant blade that was more than 10 meters long slashed down. The terrifying aura left scratches on the ground. Then, with a speed that was several times faster than the speed of sound, it slashed toward Grey, who was on the Bramble Calamity Crocodile's back. Pang! Under Grey's control, the Bramble Calamity Crocodile twisted its body and used its head to block the slash. However, under the terrifying power, its giant body was immediately flipped over. It slid backward, leaving a long scratch on the ground. Where the giant blade had slashed its head, there was a slight mark. Although it was very shallow, it did appear. It was something that had never happened before. One could imagine the power of Fod slash. Moreover, the impact was not limited to this. When the Bramble Calamity Crocodile suffered such a fierce attack, Grey, who was on the Bramble Calamity Crocodile's back, was naturally affected as well. Even though the Bramble Calamity Crocodile's power had been weakened several times, Grey could not help but feel as if he had been hit by a heavy hammer. If he had not hugged the giant thorns on the Bramble Calamity Crocodile's back in time, he might have been thrown off. Whoosh! The danger did not stop there. After the attack, Fod raised the giant blade that was more than 10 meters long and pounced again. The terrifying aura once again locked onto Grey, who was the backup of the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. a sense of danger that made Gray's hair stand on end descended. With Gray's strength, it was impossible for him to block such a terrifying attack. At this time, the Bramble Calamity Crocodile did not have time to stand up and block the attack for Gray. Puff! A straight crack appeared, extending for several kilometers. Among the spectators in the distance, a few unlucky ones were directly sucked into it and fell into the deep crack. Life and death were unknown. Retreat, retreat quickly. All the spectators could not help but retreat in horror. Their faces were full of shock, and their backs were unknowingly soaked in cold sweat. Even though they were so far away, they were still affected and suffered casualties. One could only imagine how powerful the center of the battle was. As they retreated, they naturally did not forget to look at the battlefield, wanting to know the result of the battle. Unfortunately, a huge cloud of dust covered the front, making it impossible for them to see anything. This is the result of making an enemy out of the Leopold clan. The three from the Leopold clan were proud. They could already imagine the result of the Leopold clan's elder causing such destruction. The winner is the Leopold clan. The noblewoman, the fair-skinned middle-aged man, and the triangular-eyed man looked at Aubrey proudly. Unfortunately, they saw an extremely calm face. With an invisible connection with Gray, Aubrey could roughly sense Gray's situation. He was certain that Gray was not seriously injured, so he was not worried at all. As expected, when the dust settled, Fod, the Bramble Calamity Crocodile, and Gray's figures appeared. He saw that Gray's clothes were in tatters, but he was not seriously injured. He was standing on the Bramble Calamity Crocodile's back, on one side of the huge crack. The slash just now had not landed on his body. He dodged it. Looking at Gray, whose clothes were in tatters but who was clearly not seriously injured, many people were shocked. Such a fierce attack had affected several people, even several kilometers away, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. However, the person who had been targeted by the attack had actually dodged it and was not seriously injured. Impossible! How could he have dodged it? The lady from the Leopold clan, whose age could not be determined, covered her red lips, her eyes filled with disbelief. That attack had been amplified by the elder's blood skill. Logically speaking, the other party should not have been able to dodge it. What is that layer of purple light? Could it be because of that layer of purple light? The head of the Leopold clan, Maxwell, frowned as he looked at the purple light that enveloped Gray and the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. His intuition told him that this purple light should have helped the other party dodge the elder's attack. How could this be? Complacent expressions froze on the faces of the lady, the fair-skinned, middle-aged man, and the triangular-eyed man. The bad premonition in their hearts grew stronger. Aubrey could not be bothered with the three of them. He continued to pay attention to the direction of the battle, and only needed to prevent the other party from escaping. Time law ability. Looking at Gray and the Bramble Calamity Crocodile, shrouded in purple light, Fod's aged face was filled with shock. When he was young, he had gone out to explore, and by chance he had seen the battle of two saints of the Holy Temple. One of them had this time law ability, so he was very sure that the other party definitely had time law ability. Which Holy Temple do you belong to? He looked at Gray with apprehension and asked. To have law ability, the other party was definitely a disciple of the Holy Temple. Provoking the other party was definitely not a good thing for the Leopold clan. You don't need to know. If Gray said that he was from a certain Holy Temple, he would definitely be able to scare the other party, but he did not intend to do so. He was very unwilling to use the name of the Holy Temple to intimidate others. That was because the Holy Temple of Light was too powerful, and he could not contend against them in a short period of time. He had no choice but to use it as a last resort. As for now, there was clearly no need for that. Whoosh! Shrouded in purple light, the Bramble Calamity Crocodile quickly scuttled out at a speed many times faster than normal, its huge claws swiping at Fod. Not good. Fod was shocked. As he retreated rapidly, his figure quickly rose into the air to hide. Boom! His reaction was already fast enough, but unfortunately, under the acceleration of time law ability, The bramble calamity crocodile's speed was even more terrifying. It raised its huge claws and covered him. Bang! Suffering a heavy blow, Fod was sent flying. He rolled several times before coming to a stop. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his clothes were tattered. He was clearly injured, and his injuries were not light. Pata! Gray controlled the bramble calamity crocodile to chase after him, preparing to add another claw. Just as he was about to approach Fod, the purple light that enveloped him and the bramble calamity crocodile suddenly dispersed. Whoosh! Fod, who originally thought that he was done for, saw this opportunity and pushed his hand against the ground. His body rose into the air from the reaction force, and he quickly fled into the distance. Chasing after the bramble calamity crocodile, Gray gave chase, slightly depressed. Just a little bit more, and he would have been able to keep the other party here. He did not expect that the law of time ability would collapse at the crucial moment. Although his strength had improved greatly after coming to the origin world, it was still too difficult for him to use the law of time ability on a 40-meter-long beast like the bramble calamity crocodile. Chapter 658. The speed of an annihilation class exploded. One side was like a shadow in the sky. There was an ear-piercing sound. The other side was fast on the ground. Wherever they went, the ground shook. Fod, the thorn disaster crocodile, and Gray quickly disappeared before the eyes of the onlookers. The onlookers were dumbfounded. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock and astonishment. The Leopold family's annihilation class elite had been defeated. He had been forced to flee. Now he was being chased. This was a surprising result. It was a result they could not believe. Before this, no one thought Gray would win. The Leopold family's annihilation class elite had shown too much power. An annihilation class elite with a combination of weaponry and fire powers. Such power should have been enough to crush an ordinary disaster class blood beast. Furthermore, it was just a disaster class blood beast controlling a corpse. The result surprised them. The one who was defeated was not Gray Fergus, who controlled a disaster class blood beast corpse. It was the Leopold family's annihilation class elite. This result surprised them. Mr. Fod lost? The white-faced, beardless man shook his head. He could not accept this result. Mr. Fod, whom the Leopold family relied on, had been defeated. Gray Fergus must have a powerful demonic weapon. He must have used a powerful demonic weapon to defeat Mr. Fod. The woman, whose age could not be determined, looked shocked. She could not accept this result. In the end, she found a reason she did not believe. They did not see him use a demonic weapon. Even if he did, it was a shocking result. After all, his level was not annihilation class. Let's go. The leader of the Leopold family, Maxwell Leopold, looked glum. Although he was surprised by this result, he knew it was not the time to be surprised. Even the annihilation class elder had run away. If they continued to stay there, it would be very dangerous. The three of them did not hesitate to turn around and flee. They chose to go in the opposite direction of Fod, the thorn disaster crocodile, and Gray. Mr. Maxwell, do not leave the three of us behind. The upper-class woman, the fair-skinned middle-aged man, and the triangular-eyed man saw that the situation had taken a turn for the worse and wanted to escape with the three of them. However, they were stopped by Aubrey. Each of the three members of the Leopold family possessed magic light level battle prowess, and they weren't ordinary magic light. He couldn't stop them alone, so he could only let them do as they wished. However, the rich lady, the fair-skinned middle-aged man, and the triangular-eyed man were different. All three of them were at the king's stage. With his strength, he was more than capable of stopping them. Hearing the call for help, the Leopold family trio's footsteps paused for a moment. However, in the next moment, they sped up and left without any hesitation. Since the robbery had failed, the trio no longer had any value. There was no need to bring them along. Moreover, after bringing them along, not only would it slow down their movement speed, it might even cause Gray Fergus to pursue them relentlessly. After all, Gray Fergus was bound to be furious at the betrayal of the three. No, you can't abandon us. Save us, please save us. Seeing that the Leopold family trio did not stop, the upper-class woman, the fair-skinned, middle-aged man and the triangular-eyed man immediately became terrified. They were all too clear about Gray's methods. If they were to fall into Gray's hands, they would definitely die. However, the only person who could save them had chosen to stand by and watch. This caused them to involuntarily panic. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With Aubrey blocking their path, the three of them turned around and fled in different directions. However, they soon discovered that their path was blocked once again. The one who stopped them wasn't Aubrey. Aubrey was still standing behind them. The ones who blocked their path were other members of the Raleigh family. There were even people from other forces in the city. They obviously wanted to do Gray a favor. You can't go anywhere today. His Excellency Gray has always treated you well, but you actually dared to betray His Excellency Gray and bring the Leopold family here. I'm ashamed to be your companion. A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s spoke righteously, as if he had always been a staunch supporter of Gray. However, after learning that the Leopold family had come knocking on their door, his attitude became ambiguous. Although he did not stand out to oppose them, he had been observing from the sidelines. You actually did such a thing. You're too disappointing. An old man also scolded him in pain. As for his thoughts not long ago, only he himself knew. In the end, the three of them were captured by a group of people and locked up with special handcuffs that could restrict the power of blood, waiting for Gray to return and deal with them. We won't be able to catch up. Standing on the back of the Bramble Calamity Crocodile, Gray's brows furrowed. The distance between the Bramble Calamity Crocodile and Fod was increasing. In terms of speed, the Bramble Calamity Crocodile was not slower than Fod. However, one was running on the ground with many obstacles, while the other was running in a straight line in the sky. It was natural that the distance between them would increase. I cannot let him escape. Gray did not plan on letting the Leopold family, an Annihilation class elite, and the Leopold family behind him, go. It was not just because the Leopold family had attacked him. It was also because the Leopold family already knew about the Spirit Zone. They knew that the wealth in the Spirit Zone had fallen into his hands. If the wealth in the Spirit Zone could attract the top-class Leopold family, it would naturally attract other top-class families as well. If the Leopold family spread the news or cooperated with other top-class families, then his situation would be very dangerous. BZZT. The purple light spread, covering Gray and the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. Suddenly, the Bramble Calamity Crocodile's speed increased by several times. It was like a purple light, quickly closing the distance between it and Fod. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The giant tail twitched, and many giant rocks flew into the sky, attacking Fod in the sky. Fod hurriedly increased the distance between them to avoid being hit by the giant rocks. He continued to run forward, and the distance between them increased again. He used his time rule power to catch up to Fod again. After a few times, continuing like this is not a solution. Looking at Fod in the sky, Gray thought of a solution. With the time rule's acceleration, it was enough to ensure that the Bramble Calamity Crocodile would not be left behind by Fod. However, it was difficult to stop Fod. One could even say that he did not know what to do because the Bramble Calamity Crocodile did not have the ability to fly. Its attacks could not attack the opponent in the sky. Do I have to switch the corpse controller to Marna? No, this is too dangerous. Gray thought of switching the corpse controller to Maruna, who had the ability to fly, but he immediately rejected the idea. Maruna's power was not enough to deal with Fod. If the corpse controller was switched to Marna, the one who should run would not be Fod. It would be him. What's going on? Suddenly, Maruna, who was running in the sky, stopped abruptly and almost fell from the sky. Although he barely managed to stabilize his body, his running speed was not as fast as before. At best, he was at the 5th tier of magic light. Is the injury on his body too severe? Gray was puzzled. How could his opponent's speed suddenly drop so much? He could not help but guess that it was because his injuries were too severe. No, he was only hit by the Bramble Calamity Crocodile. Logically speaking, his injuries should not be too severe. Soon, Gray shook his head and rejected this conjecture. With his opponent's destruction grade physical defense, taking a hit from the Bramble Calamity Crocodile, although his injuries were not light, was definitely not severe enough to affect his movement speed. Could it be? Gray thought of a rumor about the Leopold family, and his eyes lit up. He immediately decided to switch the corpse controller to Maruna. So, after putting away the Bramble Calamity crocodile's body, Maruna, who was under control again, grabbed Gray and flew into the sky. He quickly chased after Fod. The time rule power buffed Maruna's body. Maruna's speed became extremely scary. He reached Annihilation grade. He was even faster than normal Annihilation grade. In just a few moments, he had already caught up with Fod, and before Fod could react, his fist smashed into Fod's body. Pang! Fod did not have time to block, and he was hit by the punch. He fell to the ground, creating a deep crater. Fod's chest was a mess of flesh and blood. He flipped over and jumped off the ground. He wanted to jump out of the crater and escape, but the next moment, pang! A fist wearing a boxing glove came down. He fell to the ground again. He was smashed into the crater. Pang! 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 Fod, who wanted to escape, was smashed into the crater. The depth and area of the crater quickly increased. Now, Fod was like a level 5 magic light who could not even use his blood beast ability. Under Maruna's terrifying speed, he was continuously attacked. He could not resist at all. Pang! Another heavy hit. Fod lay in the center of the crater. His body was covered in wounds. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. He could not get up for a long time. Gray and Maruna appear beside him. Looking at the heavily injured opponent, Gray's face flashed with realization. No wonder there are rumors that the Leopold family does not deserve to be called a top family. At this moment, he finally understood why the Leopold family was not recognized as a top family by some top families. Chapter 659. When he was investigating the Leopold family, Gray had heard that the Leopold family was not recognized by the top families. He did not think too much about it, because it was obvious that the top families were trying to suppress the Leopold family. That was the truth. The rumors were that the top families were trying to suppress the Leopold family, but there was a reason behind all that. The reason was, thinking of this, Gray looked at Fod with a playful gaze and said mockingly, "Don't worry. I cannot believe that the Leopold family is relying on the Annihilation class elite. In fact, he is only at the 5th level of Magic Light." Yes, Fod was only at the 5th level of Magic Light. It was shocking, but it was the truth. He was not at the Annihilation class. He was only at the 5th level of Magic Light. Tell me, what did you use to make your level comparable to Annihilation class? Gray was very curious. What method did he use to make his level go from the 5th level of Magic Light to Annihilation class? In a previous battle, his performance was no different from Annihilation class. He could not tell that he was at the 5th level of Magic Light. Don't even think about it. Fod was lying on the ground with wounds all over his body. He could not even move his fingers. He coldly stared at Gray. Although he had been captured, the dignity of an Annihilation class elite did not allow him to compromise. Without realizing it, he had completely immersed himself in the role of an Annihilation class elite. He had almost forgotten that he was only at the 5th level of Magic Light. Plus, forcefully going from the 5th level of Magic Light to Annihilation class was a very tempting secret. He believed that Fod would want to know this secret. As long as Fod did not know this secret, he would be safe. Are you really not going to tell me? The corner of Gray's mouth curled into a sneer. Along with his sneer, Maruna took a step forward, the claws on his hands revealing razor-sharp blades. This is the biggest secret of the Leopold family. I will not tell you. The look in Gray's eyes and Maruna's current stance gave Fod an inexplicable chill. But when he thought of the allure of the secret of forcibly raising one's realm, he relaxed. The other party would definitely not kill him before getting the secret out of him. Then go to hell. The smile on Gray's face vanished, turning into complete coldness. Then he saw Maruna suddenly bend down, the sharp blades on his fists and claws stabbing towards Fod. The Leopold family's secret of forcefully raising one's cultivation level was indeed very tempting. This was also the reason why he spent so much effort to ask. However, if the Leopold family thought that they could rely on this to force him to not kill them, then they were gravely mistaken. With the ability to resurrect, he could make even the most stubborn person speak obediently. Of course, this process might cause the person to lose their memories and forget some things. These things might not be important, or they might be extremely important. In other words, they might forget the secret of forcefully raising one's cultivation level. This was also the reason why he had asked at the beginning instead of immediately killing and using the resurrection ability. However, Gray was not worried about this. The Leopold family was not the only one who knew this secret. Some of the higher-ups of the Leopold family must know as well. If the Leopold family forgot, then he could just interrogate the other higher-ups of the Leopold family. Stop. As long as you promise not to kill me, I will tell you. I can even make you like me. Seeing Maruna's sharp blade aimed at his chest, Fod panicked. It was a pity that he didn't know that Gray would never agree to the conditions he offered. A 5th-tier magic light, being able to reach the annihilation grade through some means, was no different from resurrecting a destruction warrior. He was the ideal target for Gray's resurrection ability. No matter what, Gray would not let him go. Poof! The sharp edges of the claws pierced deeply into Fod's chest, piercing through his beating heart. Blood splattered everywhere, and it was as if a fountain was spurting out from his chest. You actually killed me. Are you not interested in the secret of raising your cultivation level? With his heart pierced, the lack of blood supply to his brain made Fod feel dizzy. He stared at Gray in shock. Before he had even asked for the secret, he had already killed him. No, I am very interested, but you will tell me yourself later. Gray shook his head slightly and said something that Fod did not understand. Fod opened his mouth to say something, but he was unable to speak. Endless darkness enveloped him, and he quickly fell into the endless abyss. Gray stepped forward and checked his breathing. He then used his infrared perception to confirm that he was dead. Then, he pressed his hand on the man's head. Using the resurrection ability, all the plants in the surrounding area emitted a green light and quickly withered. Fod was wrapped in the green light and turned into a green cocoon of light. The wounds on his body quickly healed. Even the pierced heart was being repaired. The original soul, after undergoing a mysterious transformation, became a new soul. It was as if the original soul was used as nourishment to cultivate a new soul. After a few minutes, Fod's wounds were all healed. His heart was beating again, and he stood up. He was Fod, but he was no longer the original Fod. Tell me, how did you forcibly raise your cultivation level by 1 level? Gray looked at him and asked. Yes, Master Gray. Fod replied respectfully. He did not hold back and told him the method of forcibly raising his cultivation level. Clearly, Gray was lucky that Fod had not lost this part of his memory. You relied on a hereditary magic weapon called Blood Crystal? Gray was slightly surprised. Generally speaking, the function of a magic weapon was very monotonous. It could either increase one's combat strength, speed, strength, or defense, or give the user some special ability. But this magic weapon called Blood Crystal was not only a hereditary magic weapon, it could also increase one's abilities in all aspects. It could be said that such a mana weapon was equivalent to the sum of several mana weapons. This mana weapon, known as the Blood Crystal, was probably one of the top legacy weapons among the legacy weapons. Such a powerful magic weapon, the conditions to use, it must be very harsh, right? After thinking for a while, Gray looked at Fod and asked. There were no shortcuts in this world. If one wanted to obtain great power, one had to pay a corresponding price. This magic weapon called Blood Crystal was too powerful. Gray did not think that such a magic weapon could be used easily. Yes, this magic weapon is not held in the hand or worn close to the body. It is implanted in the heart. Fod pointed at his heart and answered. Implanted in the heart. Gray was shocked. It was the first time he had heard of such a cruel way to use a magic weapon. Although he had an even stranger magic weapon in his hand that could be stored in his body, this weapon had to be taken out when it was used. It was not the type that could be implanted in the body. What made his hair stand on end was that it was implanted in the heart. What was the heart? It was the weakest part of the human body besides the brain. If the heart was pierced, Death was almost certain. But to implant a magic weapon in such a weak place, one could imagine the danger involved. This method is not suitable for me. Gray immediately gave up on the idea of implanting the blood crystal. A hereditary magic weapon was a weapon that was above a gold-grade weapon. It was a weapon that was far more valuable than a gold-grade weapon. Generally speaking, it was only in the hands of the top families. As a hereditary magic weapon, and such a special one at that, the refining of the blood crystal was definitely very difficult. If he wanted to refine it, he was afraid that it would take years to find the materials. Of course, the most important thing was that the method of implanting it was extremely dangerous. If he was not careful, he could lose his life. There was no need to take such a big risk just to increase his level. Gray learned more about the blood crystal from Fod. He finally understood why Fod had taken the risk of implanting the blood crystal. If the Leopold family wanted to become a top family, they had to have an annihilation elite. Back then, he was only at the 5th level of magic light. He had almost reached the limit of his potential. Although he was only 1 level away from annihilation class, it was difficult for him to improve. There was no other way. He had to find another way to break through. By chance, he had obtained the method to create a powerful magic weapon called the blood crystal. After careful consideration, he had decided to try it out. The result was that he had become an annihilation class elite. The Leopold family had also become a top family. They had unparalleled influence in the area. Some of the top families who knew about his situation did not agree with his annihilation class. That was why there were rumors. Chapter 660. Aside from Fod, the other 3 from the Leopold family returned to Leo City. Returning there, the 3 of them let out a sigh of relief. Leo City was the biggest city that the Leopold family controlled. It had a population of a few million. It had always been the main base of the Leopold family. After thousands of years of operation, it had been perfected by generations of people. The giant ruin of the city had a scary defense and attack power. The powerful defense was enough to keep ordinary annihilation class elites at bay. The scary attack power was even stronger than Fod, who was an annihilation class elite. With such powerful attack and defense power, even if Gray Fergus attacked, it would be enough to block or even kill him. Returning there, they were safe. Gray Fergus gave them too much pressure. Even Lord Fod was no match for him, and could only flee, let alone the 3 of them. The 3 of them were on tenterhooks along the way, afraid that Gray Fergus would turn back and pursue them. Fortunately, everything was over. They had returned to Leo City. No one could hurt them there, not even Annihilation class elite. Has Mr. Fod returned? The middle-aged man with a white face and no beard asked the leader of the city guards. Mr. Fod has returned. The leader of the city guards politely answered. Great. Mr. Fod is back. With the giant ruin of the city and Mr. Fod, if Gray Fergus dares to come, he will not be able to return. The woman whose age could not be determined patted her chest. She was relieved. Then she was angry. He has made the Leopold family suffer. Such a big loss. We cannot let this go. We cannot let this go. If the Leopold family alone is no match for him, then we will work with the other top families. I do not believe he can withstand the combined attack of 2 top families. The middle-aged man with a white face and no beard said angrily. Whether it was him or the woman whose age could not be determined, they both chose to forget that this was caused by the Leopold family. Gray was just being forced to fight back. Let's go. We will talk when we see Mr. Fod. The patriarch of the Leopold family, Maxwell, said. He sat in a luxurious carriage and gestured for the other 2 to follow. Although he did not reveal his emotions like the other 2, his slightly gloomy face showed that his anger towards Gray Fergus was no less than the other 2. The carriage carried the 3 of them into the city and into a huge manor in the center of the city. After asking where Fod was, the 3 of them hurried over. Lord Fod, are your injuries serious? Seeing Fod, the 3 of them asked anxiously. Fod was the only Annihilation class elite in the Leopold family. He could not afford to lose him. After all, if something happened to him, the Leopold family would lose their status as a top-class family. After losing their status as a top family, the Leopold family's right to speak in deterrence would be severely weakened. This was something that they, who had already tasted the benefits of being a top family, absolutely did not want to see. It's not too serious. I'll recover after a few days of rest. Fod shook his head slightly. He did not look any different than usual. However, when he looked at the three of them, there was a hidden coldness in his eyes. The three of them did not notice it. After confirming that Fod was not seriously injured, the three of them relaxed. They could not help but turn their attention to the matter at hand. The pale-faced, middle-aged man said angrily, "Lord Fod, Grey Fergus has made the Leopold family suffer a great loss. We cannot let this go. We must teach Grey and Fergus a lesson." The more the middle-aged man spoke, the more agitated he became. It was as if the Leopold family had suffered the greatest humiliation in history. If they did not wash away this humiliation, the Leopold family would never be able to raise their heads again. He did not notice that as he spoke, someone had walked out of the room behind him and was looking at him with interest. This person had black hair and an extremely young face. It was Grey, whom he was preparing to deal with. The person beside him, the woman whose age could not be determined, and Maxwell noticed. They were so shocked by this unexpected scene that they completely forgot to warn him. "Lord Fod, what do you think? Which top family do you think is suitable to cooperate with?" After expressing his opinion, the middle-aged man looked at Fod expectantly. At this moment, a voice sounded behind him. "You have quite a lot of resentment toward me. Who is it?" Hearing the voice behind him, the middle-aged man turned around abruptly and was shocked. He could not help but retreat. The person he was preparing to deal with was actually behind him. "With such a great resentment toward me, if I let you continue to live, I'm afraid you'll end up like those three from the Raleigh family." Grey sneered as he looked at the middle-aged man. Then, he walked over at a moderate pace. Last time, too many people from the Raleigh family had died. If another batch died, there would not be enough people to maintain Raleigh City. Therefore, he did not carry out too strict a cleanup of the remaining people. The result was the betrayal of 3 people, which brought him the great enemy of the Leopold family. Although the result was not bad, as he had gained a subordinate with annihilation grade combat power and a top force, being betrayed was a fact. This time, in order to control the Leopold family, he decided to carry out a bloody cleanup. He would not let go of any sign of this. "You, what do you want to do?" "Master Fod, save me." Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The middle-aged man begged Fod for help. Unfortunately, all he saw was Fod's cold face. He had no intention of stopping Grey. Whoosh! His face, which was already extremely white, became even whiter. It was a paleness of fear, driven by the will to live. He turned around and prepared to break the wall and escape. Shwa! A purple light enveloped his body. He stopped crashing into the wall, and his body quickly became old. His hair turned white, his skin became wrinkled, his face was full of wrinkles, and his body became bent. The originally middle-aged man became even older than Fod in an instant. In the end, his eyes were lifeless, and he fell straight down. One hit, and he died. With Grey's current 4-stage king class, the time rule ability he used was enough to take away the entire lifespan of a magic light. "Master Fod, what is going on?" Their companion was killed in an instant, but Fod did not stop it. The woman and Maxwell, whose age could not be determined, looked at Fod in shock. They had a guess, but they could not believe it. From today onwards, the Leopold family belongs to Master Grey. Choose die or submit. Fod glanced at the two coldly. A terrifying aura emanated from his body and locked onto the two. If they said no, he would immediately kill them. After a bloody purge, almost half of the upper echelons of the Leopold family were killed. The 3 traitors of the Rahl family were a lesson to be learned. This time, Grey would not be merciful. Because of this, the Leopold family's strength decreased a lot. However, Grey did not care. He was interested in Fod, who was a 5th-stage magic light, but had the combat power of an annihilation class existence. As for the Leopold family, it was just a side benefit. With his harvest from the ghost territory, he did not lack cultivation resources for the next few years. Therefore, it was no longer meaningful for him to control force. The only use it had was to help him deal with trivial matters, so he did not have to waste time on unnecessary trifles. See if the Leopold family has the blood of a disaster grade, mixed ability gold, and shadow class blood fiend. Also, see if there are any disaster grade mixed ability blood fiends in the Leopold family's collection. Now that he had complete control of the Leopold family, Gray ordered Fod. Fod responded respectfully and left. After a short while, he returned and reported to Gray. Master Gray, the Leopold family does not have the blood of a disaster grade, mixed ability gold, and shadow class blood fiend in their collection. As for the blood of a disaster grade, mixed ability blood fiend, there are a total of 2 types. One is a disaster grade mixed ability blood fiend with weaponization and fire class blood fiend, and the other is a disaster grade mixed ability blood fiend with lightning and metal class blood fiend. Not even the Leopold family? After hearing the report, Gray was slightly disappointed. The Leopold family did not have the blood of a disaster grade mixed ability blood fiend with metal and shadow class blood fiend, and the blood of other disaster grade mixed ability blood fiends were not suitable for him. However, he could understand. The Leopold family was at the bottom of the top families, and only Fod had the ability to kill disaster grade blood fiends. It was natural that they did not have many disaster grade mixed ability blood fiends. Lord Gray, you should be able to purchase the blood of the blood fiends you need in Chaos City. When the rune ship passes by, you just have to send someone to buy it. However, I suggest that you make a trip there personally. Fod thought for a while and said, You suggest that I go there personally? Why? Gray looked at Fod in surprise. Fod, who was revived by the resurrection ability, must be completely loyal to him, so it was impossible for him to plot against him. Since he said that, there must be a reason. Because in 2 months, the Chaos Holy Palace's Tower of Trials will open. Tower of Trials? What kind of place is that? Gray was puzzled. He had heard of the Chaos Holy Palace before. It was a holy palace on the same level as the Holy Palace of Light. Its strength was extremely terrifying, and the Chaos territory was under their influence. However, this was the first time he had heard of the Tower of Trials. That is a training ground. It is used as a training ground for the disciples of the Chaos Holy Palace. I heard that everyone who enters will have their strength greatly increased after they come out. This place only opens once every 5 years, and this year is the 5th year that it opens. Fod explained. Chapter 661. The power of the people who go and will increase greatly when they come out. Gray's eyes looked bright. The trial tower was a place where one could quickly increase their power. It made him think of the trial island he had encountered before. He did not know if the trial tower was a place like the trial island. Now that he thought about it, only the Holy Temple would be able to create a trial island. Even the top families would not be able to do so. The trial island definitely did not belong to their plane. It was very likely that it had just passed by their plane while drifting through space. It was not difficult to guess that the island had the ability to drift through space, since it was located in a crack in space. If it belongs to the Chaos Holy Palace, outsiders should not be allowed to enter. Gray looked at Fod with confusion. Even if the trial tower of the Chaos Holy Palace opened, it should not have had much to do with him, an outsider. After all, he was not a member of the Chaos Holy Palace. He was not even a member of the Chaos Holy Palace. Hearing Fod's tone, it seemed as if the trial tower's opening was beneficial to him. That made him confused. No, the trial tower is a trial place for the Chaos Holy Palace members, but non-members of the Chaos Holy Palace can still enter. Fod did not answer right away. He looked at Gray and asked, What is it? Mr. Gray, do you know why a top family is called top family? Is it because a top family has an annihilation class elite? Gray looked at Fod strangely. He did not understand why he was asking such a question. Hearing Gray's answer, Fod shook his head and nodded. Having an annihilation class elite, there is the symbol of a top-class family, Hansen said. In fact, the reason a top-class family can be called a top-class family is because the top-class family has been approved by the Holy Palace faction. The Leopold family has been approved by the Chaos Holy Palace. To become a top family, you need to be approved by the Chaos Holy Palace? Gray looked surprised. He did not expect the top families and the Chaos Holy Palace to have such a relationship. Up until now, the situation he'd seen was that the clans were divided, and they frequently clashed and attacked each other. It was like a small independent kingdom that governed its own affairs. Occasionally, there would be forces that were destroyed, and occasionally, new forces would be born. The Divine Temple, on the other hand, was completely above all the other forces. They did not interfere in any of the conflicts and allowed them to fight to the death. No one would have thought that the top clans would have such a relationship with the Divine Temple. The top-class families have annihilation-class elites. Even the Holy Palace factions cannot ignore them. So, the Holy Palace factions control the top-class families within their sphere of influence. Of course, this kind of control isn't a bad thing for the top clans. Except for special circumstances where they have to be conscripted, they are usually very free and can even obtain some extra privileges. Fod said, "Some privileges?" Gray was deep in thought, and Fod's next words confirmed his guess. Fod nodded. Fod nodded and said, "Yes, some privileges. For example, the recommendation to enter the trial tower. All the top clans have a recommendation, and they can recommend their children to enter. Of course, the Chaos Holy Palace will select the recommended children. In the end, only a very small number of people will have the chance to enter the trial tower. But with Master Gray's power, it should not be a problem. You won't even need to use too much power to pass. Okay, then let's go to Chaos City." After thinking for a while, Gray made a decision. The trial tower was a chance to quickly increase his power. It would have been fine if he did not know, but since he knew, he could not miss it. There was still some time before the ruined ship arrived. Gray left Leo City and returned to Rawl City. Soon, the three traitors were tied up and brought before him. "You have guts. You dare to collude with the Leopold family to go against me." Gray looked at the three coldly. His eyes were full of cold, murderous intent. Because of the three's betrayal, he had encountered a lot of trouble. Although the trouble had been resolved, he was still angry. "Master Gray, I was wrong. Let me go. Let me go just this once." Being stared at by Gray, it was like having a sharp blade on their necks. It could fall at any time. The woman who was dressed like a noblewoman could not take it anymore. She cried and begged for mercy. "Master Gray, I was just confused. Please let me go this once." After that, the triangular-eyed man also begged for mercy. "Idiot, you have seen how cruel Gray Fergus can be. He will not let us go. Begging for mercy is useless." The fair-skinned, middle-aged man was very stubborn. He scolded the two of them, and then looked up at Gray with a cold smile. "Gray Fergus, it is my bad luck to be defeated by you. But don't get cocky. Although you have defeated the Leopold family's annihilation-class elite, the power of a top family is not something you can imagine. Just wait. The Leopold family will come for revenge." "Is that so? It looks like you know a lot about the top families." Gray did not immediately kill the fair-skinned, middle-aged man. He looked at the man with interest. "How do you think the Leopold family will come for revenge? Tell me about it, so that I can be mentally prepared." "Huh, you think it is easy now? When the Leopold family comes for revenge, you will not be able to relax." Hearing the mockery in Gray's voice, the fair-skinned, middle-aged man coldly laughed. "Indeed, the Leopold family might not be able to deal with you, but that does not mean the other top families will not be able to. It is a spirit land that has never been explored. Any top faction will be tempted. The Leopold family will join forces with the other top families to come for you. When that happens, it will be your death. I will be waiting for you down there. I believe it will not be long before you come to accompany me." The fair-skinned, middle-aged man had an evil smile on his face. He looked at Gray as if he was looking at a dead man. "Your analysis is correct. The Leopold family will join forces with the other top families. I cannot fight a few top families working together." Facing the fair-skinned, middle-aged man's evil smile, Gray's face remained calm as he slowly spoke. "But what if the Leopold family is like the Raleigh family and belongs to me?" "Impossible. Although you defeated the Leopold family's annihilation-class elite, it is impossible for you to make the Leopold family submit to you like the Raleigh family did." The fair-skinned, middle-aged man laughed madly. He did not believe Gray's words. I am afraid you cannot even enter Leo City. Even if you enter, you'll be kicked out of Leo City by the rune circle. In that case, look behind you." Gray's face looked amused. The fair-skinned, middle-aged man looked behind him. In the next moment, his face looked shocked. His entire body froze. Behind him, a bald old man appeared. It was Leopold, the Annihilation Class Elite. He walked in front of Gray, bowed, and said, "Greetings, greetings, greetings." "Mr. Gray," the fair-skinned, middle-aged man said. "No, impossible. The Leopold family cannot submit to you. He cannot be the Leopold family's Annihilation Class Elite. He must just be someone who looks like him." He could not believe what he was seeing. The fair-skinned, middle-aged man madly screamed. "Use the Leopold family's unique power to kill him. Prove to him that you are a member of the Leopold family," Han's son coldly said. Gray ordered coldly. Having received Gray's order, Fod's right hand lengthened, transforming into a black blade that was several meters long. Crimson flames swirled around the blade as it chopped down at the fair-skinned, middle-aged man. Blurk! The red blade kept getting bigger and bigger before the fair-skinned, middle-aged man's eyes. He could not believe it. In the end, it hit the fair-skinned, middle-aged man. The fair-skinned, middle-aged man was cut in half. The two halves of his body were wrapped in red flame. They were instantly burned to ash. The moment he died, he was able to confirm the identity of his opponent. He was able to use a red flame blade. There was no doubt about his opponent's identity. Pew! Pew! After two more slashes, the noblewoman and the triangular-eyed man were cut in half. They were burned to ash by the flames. Gray ignored their pleas for mercy. He looked at Aubrey, who had been politely waiting on him. His voice was cold as he spoke. "Clean them up. I do not want someone like this to appear in the Luo Lai family again." Aubrey politely replied and left. It was certain that many people in the Luo Lai family would die soon. Chapter 662. In the training field that was paved with white jade, Gray stood quietly with his hands lowered. In his mind, there was a human-shaped giant beast pattern. The giant beast pattern was made up of tens of thousands of patterns that evolved according to a certain pattern. As the patterns evolved, the giant beast's movements changed. Sometimes it roared, sometimes it beat its chest, and sometimes it stomped its feet. "Fury!" Gray roared. He activated the giant beast pattern in his mind. His body suddenly became burly. His body suddenly grew taller. In a very short amount of time, he had reached more than 6 feet tall. He had become a 6-foot-tall, burly man. His clothes, which were originally loose, were now stretched by his swollen body. It was as if they could not bear the weight and would tear apart at any time. "Second Fury!" Gray roared once again. Then, his originally burly body of over 2 meters began to expand once again. He became even more burly and taller. Rip! His clothes, which were of such high quality that ordinary people would never be able to afford them in their entire lives, were instantly torn into strips of cloth. Gray, on the other hand, was about 2.5 meters tall. His entire body was extremely sturdy, and his arms were as thick as a woman's waist. Boom! Facing the air, he suddenly threw a punch. Suddenly, there was an ear-piercing sonic boom. A gust of wind spread out and hit the wall. It surged in the training style. It was not easy. I finally reached the 2nd level. Deactivating Fury, Gray sighed. It took him half a year to reach the 1st level of Fury, but it took him 2 years to reach the 2nd level of Fury. The time taken was 4 times longer than before. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to cultivate the 2nd level of Fury. He almost thought that his talent in cultivating blood skills was too poor. It was impossible for him to cultivate the 2nd level of Fury. Fortunately, after asking Fod, he was relieved. Compared to Fod, although his talent in blood skills was not the best, it was definitely not bad. It should be able to reach the upper level. The 2nd level of Fury is enough to make my combat power stronger. With the time rule power, I wonder if I can fight an Annihilation Class Elite. Thinking about the Annihilation Class Elites, Gray's face looked excited. Annihilation Class, even in the Source world, was a class that was considered an elite. As for the Magic Light class, although they were usually called elites, they did not live up to their names. In a top-class family like the Leopold family, they would be laughed at. Only Annihilation class elites were recognized as elites. Only then could they be given the title of elites in any situation. Although Berserk blood skill is good, it is not without its disadvantages. Looking at his clothes that had turned into strips of cloth, Gray shook his head slightly. This was the disadvantage of the blood skill Fury. He had given Sophia his original set of black combat equipment that could change according to his body size. Hence, he was once again in an awkward situation where he had to use his blood skill. I wonder if the Leopold family has such a battle armor in their treasury. After changing into a new set of clothes, Gray looked for Fod to ask. Very quickly, Fod brought him something from the Leopold family's treasury. It was a blue battle armor. Normally, it was in a blue ring. After it was activated, it would attach to the body. According to Fod, it was a battle armor that was designed for situations similar to Gray's. Clearly, Gray was not the only one who had a transformation-type blood skill or ability. The defense of the battle armor was not very strong. At its strongest, it could only withstand magic light attacks. It was similar to the defense of Gray's original battle armor. The Leopold clan didn't have any equipment that was stronger than this. This equipment had already reached the gold rank, and the only equipment that was stronger than this was the legacy grade equipment. The Leopold clan's only legacy weapon was the blood crystal in Fact's body. It was not hard to see that the Leopold family was at the bottom of the top-class families. Normally, top-class families had a few inheritance-class weapons, but the Leopold family only had one. By the way, when will the runic ship arrive? Gray asked Fod, who was standing beside him, as he enjoyed Kinsa's massage. He was so comfortable that he squinted his eyes. It should be in the next 2 days. At the latest, it should arrive in 3 days. Fod replied. 2 days later, in Leo City, 100-meter-long behemoth slowly descended from the sky and finally stopped at a specially built mooring in Leo City. Many golden rune patterns could be vaguely seen on the surface of the behemoth. It looked like a giant ship. It was the runic ship. The cabin door opened, and a soft carpet-covered staircase slid down. Several tall women in long dresses walked down the stairs and stood on both sides of the staircase. When someone bought a ticket to board the ship, they would act as guides and guide the other party to the corresponding cabin. Sir, this way. After buying a VIP ticket, Gray brought Fod and Kinsa to the upper cabin of the runic ship under the guidance of a woman in a long dress. They entered a suite. In the suite, there was not only a master's lounge, but also a servant's lounge and a training room. There was even a small living room. It was extremely complete. Of course, the cost was not cheap. It cost a total of 50,000 magic coins, which was 5 times more expensive than an ordinary ticket. However, with a top family like Leopold as their source of income, this cost was naturally nothing. Accompanied by a trembling sound, the runic ship slowly floated up. Its 100-meter-long body seemed to have lost gravity as it floated into the sky. Looking out from the crystal window, one could see the buildings in Leo City slowly becoming smaller and finally becoming like a model. The runic ship only stopped rising when it rose to 1,000 meters in the air. A layer of earthen yellow light appeared and enveloped the runic ship, completely enveloping it. Then, the runic ship began to move horizontally, constantly accelerating. Its speed became faster and faster until its speed was comparable to the 5th level of demonic light. Only then did this acceleration stop, and the ship's speed became stable. The scenery on the ground rapidly changed. The rapidly moving runic ship stirred up intense wind pressure. However, the interior of the runic ship was extremely stable. The earthen yellow light shield protected the runic ship, completely isolating it from the violent wind pressure outside. Its speed can actually reach the 5th level of magic light. The cost of such a runic ship is probably not cheap, right? Gray looked at Fod and asked. Not only is it not cheap, it is extremely expensive. Fod sighed slightly. Generally speaking, creating a runic ship requires several rune masters and hundreds of rune masters to be busy for a year. Some of the more complicated runic ships even require several years. Not only is the cost of various materials an astronomical figure, Even the salary of the rune masters and rune masters is a huge expense. A family that owns a runic ship must be a top family, and among the top families, it must be a family with an extremely deep foundation. The wealth that the Leopold family has accumulated over the years is not even enough to buy such a runic ship. In the evening, Gray and the other two went to the restaurant for dinner. Anyone who bought a ticket would be free of charge. Moreover, those who bought a VIP ticket would have a special VIP restaurant. Whether it was the quality of the ingredients or the standard of the chef, it was better than ordinary restaurants. Arriving at the VIP restaurant, Gray found that there were already people in the restaurant. Like them, there were 3 people, an old man, a young man, and a young woman. The old man had brown hair, but there was a little white in his brown hair. His figure was slightly thin, and he wore a gray suit. His eyes were calm, but gave people a sense of wisdom. The young man was about 13 or 14 years old. He wore a bright yellow suit, and there was a little baby fat on his face. He looked rather cute. The young woman had long brown hair that draped over her shoulders. The ends of her hair were slightly curly, and she had a slender figure. She wore a long dress as white as jade, and there was a pair of sapphire earrings on her ears. Her amber eyes carried a kind of gentleness like water. This was a beautiful woman who was as gentle as water, at least on the surface. While Gray and the other 2 were sizing up the other 3, the other 3 were also sizing up Gray and the other 2. Their gazes met, and they nodded slightly at each other before moving away. Gray noticed that the 3 had a golden flower symbol on their clothes. It should be the emblem of the family behind them. Fod whispered to Gray after they sat down at a table and ordered their meal from a servant who came to greet them. Those are people from the Manti family. Also a top family? Naturally, Gray had never heard of the Manti family. The only reason he knew about the Leopold family before coming into contact with them was because the Leopold family was nearby. Yes, they are a top family like the Leopold family, but unlike the Leopold family, which is at the bottom of the top families, the Manti family is at the top of the top families. There are even rumors that an elder of the Manti family is taking that step. Taking that step? Gray was shocked. The next step after Annihilation class was Rule class. He did not expect the Manti family to be so strong. They even had an elite of that level. If they really took that step, then the Manti family would probably be called the Manti Holy Clan. Of course, taking that step was very difficult. It was hard to say if the elder of the Manti family would be able to take that step. Even the Holy Palace, which had Rule class blood skills, had a very small chance of success. Many died without being able to take that step, let alone a top family. But this family was definitely powerful. It was estimated that they had at least a few Annihilation class elites, maybe even more than 10. The Leopold family, huh? While Gray and the others were talking about the Manti family, the 3 people from the Manti family were also talking about the Leopold family. However, unlike Gray and the others, the 3 people from the Manti family were calm. A family that was at the bottom of the top families did not surprise them. After dinner, Gray and the others returned to the suite. The sky outside was completely dark, but the rune ship was still moving at high speed. It did not seem like it was looking for a place to stop and rest at night. Gray asked with confusion, "The rune ship does not stop at night? There are people driving the rune ship day and night. It can fly even at night." Fod shook his head. Plus, the rune ship has an automatic memory function. As long as it goes to a place, it will record it. The next time it goes, it can follow the route automatically. It does not require a high degree of control. Chapter 663. Record the route? Autopilot? Gray was really shocked. He didn't expect the runic ship to be so automated. Although he had heard of runic ships, he didn't know that they were so highly automated. Not long ago, he was still curious about how many people were needed to operate such a huge runic ship. Now, it seemed that the number of people needed was much less than he had imagined. Do you know what is used to achieve this autopilot? I'm not too sure about the details. After all, this is the domain of Rune Masters. Fod shook his head. I only heard that it is achieved through a runic formation called the Wisdom Formation. This Wisdom Formation uses a special crystal as the main material. and is drawn with rune ink made from the blood of blood fiends with super memory ability. Super memory ability. Can you give me a detailed introduction of this super memory ability? Gray jerked. He seemed to have heard an incredible ability. This is a physical ability, but it is very rare and rarely seen. Blood fiends with this ability have very strong memory abilities and will not get lost no matter how complicated the environment is. Fod explained carefully after hearing Gray's high regard for this ability. Gray couldn't help but feel a little excited after hearing Fod's explanation. This super memory ability must be the eidetic memory ability that he had been looking for. Initially, he had yearned to be a pharmacist, so he wanted to find the blood of blood fiends with eidetic memory, so that he could have eidetic memory. Of course, this thought had faded by now. After all, there was a high-level pharmacist beside him, and there was no need for him to forego what was near and seek something far away. He had already passed the medicine formula that he had obtained from the Empire's tomb to Fod. However, Gray's desire for this ability did not diminish. The use of an eidetic memory was not limited to being an alchemist. It was also very useful in other areas. With the ability to transform, he was destined to come into contact with all kinds of blood fiends. Therefore, it was essential to have a large amount of knowledge about blood fiends. If he had the super memory ability, he could store a large amount of knowledge about blood fiends in his mind, and it would obviously give him a higher chance of obtaining the abilities of the blood fiends that he wanted. After memorizing the super memory ability, he would definitely add a type of blood fiend with super memory ability to the list of blood fiends that he wanted to purchase when he reached Chaos City. Several days later, withdrawing from cultivation, Gray walked out of the cultivation room. This was a cultivation room built with golden silkwood. The wooden floor, wooden walls, and wooden ceiling gave it a unique style. It was extremely comfortable to look at, and it was also extremely classy. The only flaw was that the training room was only a dozen square meters in size. Compared to the training room that Gray usually used, it was too small. Even the blood beast phantom that he summoned couldn't stretch out. After all, it was impossible for there to be a large cultivation room in the cabin. Fortunately, there was a special runic array set up in this kind of room that could suppress the appearance of the blood beast phantoms during cultivation. Although the blood beast phantoms would not appear, it would not affect the cultivation. Sir Gray, the hot water in the bathroom is ready. Seeing Gray come out of the cultivation room, Kin Sha walked up to him. Gray nodded slightly and walked in the bathroom. Kin quickly followed him and helped him take off his sweaty clothes for a bath. How should I spend the rest of my time? Lying in the bathtub and enjoying Kin Sha's massage, Gray couldn't help but think about how to spend the rest of his time. A few days passed. After the initial novelty, he gradually felt bored. Apart from the time he spent cultivating and comprehending his blood skills, there was still a lot of time left. He used his time to pass the time by reading books. He had been reading books for a few days in a row. Gradually, he felt bored and wanted to find another way to pass the time. Let's take a walk on the deck. After putting on a black suit, Gray walked out of the suite with Kin Sha and walked along the corridor that was paved with carpets. He walked up the stairs to the deck of the runic ship. There were many giant umbrellas on the deck. Under the giant umbrellas, there was a table, a deck chair, and a lady in a long dress who was waiting on him. Obviously, this was a place to pass the time because of the boredom in the cabin. Of course, not everyone on the ship could come here. Only those who had purchased VIP tickets could come here through the stairs in the VIP cabin. There were already people under some of the giant umbrellas. They were probably people like Gray who wanted to relax. Among them, Gray saw the siblings from the Manti family. The two of them were lying under a giant umbrella, drinking fruit juice as they chatted. They attracted a lot of attention. Of course, most of the attention was on the elder sister of the two. She wore a blue dress with spaghetti straps. When she was lying down, her curves were more obvious than usual. This was a lady whose figure wasn't inferior to Kin Sha's. Moreover, unlike Kin Sha, she had a noble aura that Kin Sha didn't have. This made her even more attractive to men. Everyone wanted to conquer such a lady. Even Gray couldn't help but be moved when he saw her. He was amazed by her beauty. Retracting his gaze, Gray found an empty spot under the giant umbrella and lay down on the deck chair. The sunlight was blocked by the giant umbrella, and because of the yellow light shield, even though they were on the deck, it didn't seem hot. After drinking a glass of fruit juice with ice, the sweet and sour taste with a hint of coolness made them feel refreshed. The pressure that had accumulated over the past few days seemed to have been swept away. And Kinshaw's massage made him feel like he was in heaven. It was so comfortable that his eyes narrowed, and he almost fell asleep. Just as he was about to fall asleep, a discordant sound suddenly entered his ears. He opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the sound. Suddenly, he saw a young man under the giant umbrella where the siblings were. This was a handsome young man. He had wavy red hair, a handsome face, a high-nosed bridge, and thin lips. No matter how you evaluated him, he wouldn't be out of the category of handsome. He was wearing a high-end suit, which made him look extremely tall. He had a charming smile on his face and said to the young Manti family woman, "Hello, I'm Miguel Vija, a member of the top Vija family. I wonder if I can have the honor of inviting you to dinner?" After a while, someone finally couldn't help but approach the woman. The young man was a person who was very confident in his appearance and family background. With his appearance and family background, he had been in love more than a few times. He could be said to be a veteran. This was also the origin of his confidence. This man is going to be defeated. Gray sat up and looked at the development of the situation with interest. He was waiting to see the appearance of the man being defeated. The man's status as a member of the top Manti family was noble. It was enough to attract many young women. Some women who love vanity would be attracted to his bed. But obviously, the woman from the top Manti family was not one of them. After all, in terms of the strength of the family, there were only a few families in the top families that could compare to the Manti family. Fortunately, the woman and the young man were dressed casually and didn't wear a suit with the Manti family emblem. Otherwise, the young man wouldn't have the courage to approach them. As Gray expected, even after hearing the young man's self-introduction, the woman's reaction was very calm. She faintly rejected him. "Sorry, I have to have dinner with the elders of the family later. How about tomorrow evening?" The young man didn't seem to hear the rejection, or he didn't give up and sent out another invitation. "Sorry, I also have to have dinner with the elders of the family tomorrow evening." The woman faintly rejected again. "Huh." The woman's attitude of rejection was obvious. It was unknown who was the first to laugh. Then, on the deck, many people, especially the men, laughed. Obviously, like Gray, they were very happy to see others being defeated. Moreover, in their hearts, they were also a little unhappy. They didn't even approach her. Why did he have to approach her? Now he was rejected. Don't you want to reconsider? Offending a top family rashly will have a bad impact on your family. Feeling the woman's obvious rejection, the young man was originally prepared to leave directly. However, the ambiguous laughter suddenly made his body stiffen, and his expression became ugly. If he left directly at this time, it would be very embarrassing. Therefore, he turned back to look at the woman, and his voice carried a little bit of threat. Scram! The gentleness on the woman's face disappeared and was replaced by frost. She coldly reprimanded. "Don't be so shameless." Being reprimanded by a woman, the young man's expression also turned cold. He reached out to grab the woman's arm and was about to grab her. Bang! The young man's hand didn't touch the woman's hand, but he inexplicably flew backward, knocking over several giant umbrellas. He didn't know when, but the woman had already stood up and punched the young man's abdomen. It was this punch that sent the young man flying. What fast speed! This is the strength of the young generation of the top families. Gray sat up straight, and his expression was slightly surprised. In that instant, the speed displayed by the woman had definitely reached the level of magic light. If the opponent's ability was a mixed ability, even he would have to be a little cautious. "Which family are you from?" The young man didn't fall heavily, and he climbed up from the ground in a slightly embarrassing state. He looked at the woman with a slightly surprised gaze. From the woman's strength, he guessed that her identity was not simple. The woman glanced at the young man indifferently and coldly said, "Manti family. If your family wants revenge, then go ahead. The Manti family will accept it." No, just now it was a joke. Please don't mind it. Sorry for disturbing you." The young man's eyes slightly bulged, and without saying a word, He turned around and left with a dejected look. Although his family was not bad among the top families, compared to a top family like the Mandy family, it was still lacking by more than just a little bit. The conflict had ended, and Gray was quite satisfied. He retracted his gaze and looked at the sky. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly bulged just like the young man's. In the sky, a giant bird with a wingspan of tens of meters was rapidly sweeping towards the runic ship. Its speed was so fast that it had already surpassed magic light. Chapter 664. There's a blood beast. Gray was not the only one who saw this. Many people on the deck saw it as well. This size, could it be a disaster-level blood beast? Someone's voice trembled slightly, speaking intermittently. That was because his teeth were chattering. Although his family was quite powerful and had a few magic light elites, they did not have an annihilation-level elite. An annihilation-level elite was enough to wipe out his family. Seeing a disaster-level blood beast that was as powerful as an annihilation-level elite scared him out of his wits. Maybe it's just big. Maybe it's not that strong. Someone seemed to be comforting himself, but not many people agreed with him. There were a few small but powerful blood beasts, but there were almost no large and weak blood beasts. A disaster-level blood beast. Thunder Flame Golden Vulture. Gray looked at the golden hair on the giant bird's head. He stood up and shielded Kesha, who was trembling behind him. His face was serious. The giant bird was huge. Its wingspan was more than 50 meters, and it took up a large part of the sky. When it flew from the sky, it was like a dark cloud that covered the sky. Its claws were covered with thick cuticles. They shone with a dark light and were as sharp as swords. They were even sharper than normal swords. Even a silver weapon would be pierced by its claws. The hair on its body was black and had a metallic texture. When it flapped its wings, there was the sound of metal colliding. On its head, there was a strand of golden hair that was different from other parts of its body. This strand of golden hair was the origin of the Thunder Flame Golden Vulture. Gray could clearly tell that it was a disaster-level blood beast because the strand of golden hair was too eye-catching. Thunder Flame Golden Vulture. Like Gray, there were a few people who recognized the giant bird. The young woman from the Manti family was one of them. She looked serious as she protected the young man in her arms. At this time, the Thunder Flame Golden Vulture had already arrived beside the rune ship. Not only was it huge, but its speed was also terrifying. Before anyone could hide in the cabin, it had already arrived. Whoosh! The Thunder Flame Golden Vulture's sharp claws swiped down at the yellow light barrier. It wanted to tear the light barrier apart because it could already see its prey under the light barrier. Boom! The metallic claws clawed at the yellow light shield, but they were unable to shatter it. The yellow light shield had blocked the claw. However, the entire ship shook violently. Many people couldn't stand firm and fell left and right. Fine cracks appeared on the surface of the yellow light shield. It was obvious that the yellow light shield wouldn't be able to last much longer. This was normal. After all, it was an attack from a disaster-level blood fiend that represented a disaster. It would be abnormal if he could withstand it without any damage. Whoosh! 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 Several figures rushed out from the lower level of the cabin and quickly appeared on the deck. One of the figures appeared beside the siblings. It was the old man who had followed the siblings. Another figure appeared beside Gray. It was Fod, who had rushed over to protect Gray. The defensive shield won't last much longer. It's not safe here. Hide in the cabin. Among the several figures, one of them swept his gaze across the crowd and ordered loudly. Hearing the order, the people who had fallen left and right scrambled toward the entrance of the cabin. They were all pushing each other, and the entrance was crowded. Gray did not follow the group to the cabin entrance. If he could not get rid of the Thunder Flame Golden Vulture, it would be useless even if he hid in the cabin. With the Thunder Flame Golden Vulture's sharp claws, it would be able to tear the cabin apart in a few swipes. So, he stayed outside to observe the situation. If the ship's guards couldn't stop the Thunder Flame Golden Vulture, he would be able to react. It didn't matter if he fought or ran. It would be better than hiding in the cabin. But for what he could tell, the situation wouldn't escalate to that level. A rune ship was a very important asset for any top-class family. It was also a scary money-making tool. A single trip like this could earn him 2 or 3 million. So, the rune ship's defenses were very tight. Normally, an Annihilation-class elite would be stationed to guard it. With an Annihilation-class elite guarding it, the Thunderflame Golden Vulture should be able to handle it. The reason he stayed outside was just to be safe. Boom! At this time, the yellow shield was attacked by the Thunderflame Golden Vulture's claws again. Although it didn't break, there were more cracks on the surface. It was like a yellow glass that was about to break. Remove the defensive shield. The person who had warned everyone to hide in the cabin was an old woman who looked to be in her 50s. Hearing her order, the yellow shield that was about to break disappeared. Seeing the yellow barrier disappear, the Thunderflame Golden Vulture instantly became excited. It charged towards the deck, heading straight for the people who were still gathered at the entrance of the deck and had yet to retreat into the cabins. Huh. The old woman coldly grunted. A giant mirror appeared out of thin air. It was like a wall coming toward the Thunder Flame Golden Vulture. Pang! The Thunder Flame Golden Vulture clawed at the mirror, but only managed to leave a shallow mark. It was sent flying away from the rune ship by the scary force of the mirror. Using this opportunity, the old woman quickly chased after the Thunder Flame Golden Vulture. She should be the Annihilation-class elite guarding the rune ship. Shwa! After being hit by the mirror, the Thunderflame Golden Vulture finally realized that its opponent was not simple. Its brown eyes looked cautious. It opened its mouth and shot a thick red plasma at the old woman. It was a plasma power that was a mix of thunder and fire elemental powers. It was much more powerful than a normal power. Pang! The red plasma hit the mirror. Gray was surprised. The red plasma that hit the mirror was reflected back at the Thunderflame Golden Vulture. The Thunderflame Golden Vulture couldn't dodge in time. It was hit by its own power. As it was sent flying, its black iron feathers were burned. She can reflect power. Gray's eyes were filled with shock. The Thunderflame Golden Vulture was not simple. It was a mixed disaster-class blood beast that had both fire and thunder elemental powers. The old woman was not simple either. The power she used was not a normal power. It was probably a mixed power. The most surprising thing was that she could reflect the Thunderflame Golden Vulture's attack. That is an ice mirror power that is a mix of ice and earth elemental powers. It has the ability to reflect elemental attacks. Of course, it does have a weakness. If it exceeds the limit of what it can withstand, it cannot reflect back. Seeing that Gray was curious about the old woman's power, Fod explained to him. Even though Gray had been reading books about the various blood fiends, he did not have super memory and could not read quickly. He could not compare to Fod, who had thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. A mix of ice and earth elemental powers? What a shame. Gray sighed and shook his head. It was impossible for him to master such an ability. Ice, fire, wind, wood, and poison had already formed the law of time. It was impossible for him to have the law of time and the ice mirror ability that was a mixture of ice and earth at the same time. Even if he drank the blood of a blood beast with the ice mirror power, the ice power that formed the ice mirror power would be absorbed into the time rule power. However, he was only curious. It was far from his desire. If he could be immune to all elemental attacks, no matter how strong or weak they were, it would be a powerful ability that he desired. However, if he couldn't reflect attacks that exceeded his limit, it would be useless. Chirp! The battle in the distance had come to an end. The Thunderflame Golden Vulture, which had been injured by the old woman's attack, let out an unwilling shriek. It then turned around and fled. The old woman wanted to stop and kill the Thunderflame Golden Vulture on the spot, but she couldn't. The Thunderflame Golden Vulture successfully escaped with its greater speed than the old woman. When the old woman returned, the yellow light shield rose again. The rune ship continued its journey. After the attack of the disaster-level blood beast, Gray was no longer in the mood to stay on the deck. He returned to his suite. Why did we encounter a disaster-level blood beast? Do flying blood beasts often attack rune ships? Kesha asked with lingering fear. To her, who was not even a king tier, a disaster-level blood beast was an unimaginable existence. This time, she was really scared. Fortunately, She knew that both Gray and Fod had the ability to fight against a disaster-level blood beast. That was why she didn't panic like the others. Attacks from flying blood beasts are quite common. We encounter them almost every time. However, disaster-level blood beasts are quite rare. Fod said, Chaos City is located on the other side of the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest is too vast. It takes too much time to go around it. Therefore, the rune ship has to go through the Forbidden Forest. Although we usually choose areas where the blood beasts are generally weaker, we still encounter disaster-level blood beasts occasionally. Half a month later, the rune ship finally arrived at Chaos City after experiencing another attack from flying blood beasts. The City of Chaos was a gigantic city developed with the Chaos Temple as its center. It was located on a plain and was extremely huge. Looking down from the runic ship, one could see rows upon rows of tall buildings that extended far into the distance. It was extremely visually impactful. The most eye-catching place in the entire Chaos City was a huge golden tower. It was far taller than the other buildings. It almost pierced through the clouds. It looked extremely magnificent. It was the Trial Tower. The rune ship landed in the city. Gray and the other two hired a horse-drawn carriage. They went to a hotel in the city. At the same time, 3 people from the Manti family walked out of the rune ship. The young woman, Blanca Manti, glanced at the horse-drawn carriage Gray and the other 2 were in. There was a hint of doubt in her eyes. They were staying in the same VIP suite. Naturally, they would meet often these days. However, the 3 of them gave her a very strange feeling. Among the 3 of them, the one who seemed to be the center didn't seem to be the old man. Instead, he seemed to be the young man. Although the 3 of them tried to hide it, she could see through the old man's casual behavior. If that was all there was to it, it was not weird. What was weird was that according to what the elders had said, the old man among the 3 was an Annihilation class elite. An Annihilation class elite was not the leader of the 3. That was very weird. Chapter 665. The horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of a huge building near the center of the city. Gray and the other 2 alighted from the carriage and looked at the building in front of them. Many crystal materials were used in the construction of the building. The colorful crystals made the building look dreamy and luxurious, but not vulgar. It showed that the building was of high quality. Men and women in bright clothes could be seen going in and out of the red-carpeted crystal door from time to time. There were slightly stout businessmen, young family members, middle-aged people who looked quite imposing and were obviously people in power. There were all kinds of people, and without exception, they were all dressed gorgeously and had high net worth. It could be seen that the business of this shop was very good. Lord Gray, this is one of the large blood fiend blood shops in Chaos City. Look around here first. If you can't find the blood fiend you want, you can go to the other shops. Fod introduced the shops to Gray as the 3 of them walked into the shop. Finding suitable blood fiend blood was one of the 2 goals of their trip. Its importance was not inferior to obtaining the opportunity to enter the Tower of Trials. Hence, they rushed here immediately after alighting from the runic ship. The 3 of them entered the shop through the crystal door. As soon as they entered, a tall woman in a standard long dress quickly came up to them. She bowed slightly to the 3 of them and asked in a sweet voice, "How can I help you, my 3 lords?" As a receptionist for a long time, she had developed a pair of experienced eyes. With just a glance, she could estimate the approximate value of a person's clothes. The clothes on these 3 people were made from the silk of the blood fiends and ice spiders. Wearing them would make them feel cool even in the hot summer. The cost of each set was more than 10,000 yuan. They were definitely among the group of people who had visited the shop today with the best quality clothes. How could the value of the items purchased by people who could wear such clothes be ordinary? The more items the customers they guided bought, the more commission they would receive. Hence, she quickly went up to them, afraid that others would beat them to it. "We need to purchase some disaster-level blood fiend's blood," Gray said calmly. "The blood fiend's blood shop is on the 3rd floor. Please follow me." Hearing that Gray wanted to buy the blood of a disaster-level blood fiend, the tall woman's eyes lit up, and the smile on her face became even sweeter. The blood of a disaster-grade blood fiend was the most expensive type of blood fiend. Every portion could be sold for tens of thousands of magic coins. The blood of some special disaster-grade blood fiends could be sold for tens of thousands or even over 100,000 magic coins. What the three of them wanted to buy was indeed not ordinary. Under the guidance of the tall woman, Gray and the other two arrived at a ring-shaped crystal counter on the third floor. The blood of the blood fiends were displayed on the ring-shaped counter, inlaid with blue crystals. Through the blue crystals, one could clearly see the blood fiend's blood stored in special crystal bottles. Jade Dragon Beast Blood, 9 Netherworld Hound Blood, Flame Burr Blood, Ice Calamity Beast Blood. Gray scanned the blood fiends casually. He didn't recognize most of the blood fiend's species, and the few he did recognize were all disaster-grade blood fiends. Clearly, this was a counter that specialized in selling disaster-grade blood fiends' blood. There were at least hundreds of types of blood fiends' blood being sold at this counter. In other words, there were hundreds of disaster-grade blood fiends' blood. Gray couldn't help but sigh. No wonder this was one of the largest blood shops in Chaos City. Just the blood fiend's blood alone had so much disaster-grade blood fiend's blood. What type of blood fiend's blood would you like to purchase? A middle-aged man stood behind the counter. He looked at Gray and the other two and asked politely, "Do you have water, lightning, metal, and shadow hybrid blood fiend's blood? Gray looked away from the counter and asked the middle-aged man, "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have the blood fiend's blood you need at the moment." The middle-aged man said apologetically, "No." Gray raised his eyebrows as a trace of disappointment flashed through his heart. If he could find the blood of a blood beast with water, thunder, metal, and shadow attributes, then he would be able to upgrade the bloodline level of all 4 abilities at once. However, this shop did not have blood of such a blood fiend. This was not hard to understand. Within the same realm, the more mixed abilities one had, the stronger one's combat power would be. It was not hard to imagine how strong a disaster-level blood fiend would be if it had 4 mixed abilities. A blood fiend of this level wasn't something that an ordinary top-notch family could hunt. Only a top-notch family like the Manti family could do so. If such a clan hunted a 4-elemental disaster-level blood fiend, it would be digested internally. Normally, they would not sell the blood of the blood fiends. Do you have the blood of mixed shadow-type and metal-type blood fiends? Since he couldn't buy the blood of a 4-elemental blood beast, he could only lower his requirements and find the blood of a shadow-elemental and metal-elemental blood beast. Then, he could combine them with the water-elemental and thunder-elemental blood beasts he had and transform them twice. Yes, we have the golden shadow calamity butterfly and the shadow blade mantis. Which one do you need? The middle-aged man took out the catalog of blood fiends and said, "The golden shadow calamity butterfly and the shadow blade mantis? Fod, which one do you think is more suitable?" Gray looked at Fod and asked. He had never heard of these 2 types of disaster-level blood fiends. He didn't know which one was more suitable for him. Hearing Gray's question, Fod pondered for a moment. He naturally understood what Gray meant by more suitable. As a person who was resurrected by the resurrection ability, he had absolute loyalty to Gray. Moreover, his life and death were completely in the hands of Gray, so Gray didn't hide his transformation ability from him. After thinking for a moment, he opened his mouth and said, "The golden shadow calamity butterfly's flying speed is faster. It should be more suitable to be used as a catalyst for an ability potion. Then let's buy the blood of the golden shadow calamity butterfly. I want one." The same words, in Gray's ears, in the ears of the middle-aged man and the tall woman next to him, were obviously different. In the ears of the middle-aged man and the tall woman, the golden shadow calamity butterfly had the characteristic of fast speed and was more suitable to be used to refine an ability potion. But in Gray's ears, the golden shadow calamity butterfly had the advantage of speed compared to the shadow blade mantis and was more suitable to be used as a catalyst for transformation. Soon, the blood of the golden shadow calamity butterfly in an exquisite yellow crystal bottle was delivered to Gray. Gray suddenly remembered that there was another type of blood fiend he needed and couldn't help but ask. "By the way, do you have the blood of a blood fiend with super memory ability?" "Yes, but only the misty monkey." "Give me one." The 2 portions of blood cost Gray 100,000 magic power coins in the end. The most expensive one wasn't the blood of the golden shadow calamity butterfly, but the blood of the mist monkey with super memory ability. It cost 70,000 magic power coins, while the golden shadow calamity butterfly was only 30,000 magic power coins. It wasn't hard to see how precious the blood of a blood fiend was. Although it was related to the mixed ability, it wasn't absolute. The rarer the ability, the more expensive the blood of a blood fiend with that ability. After leaving this shop, Gray and the others went to several other large blood fiend blood shops in Chaos City. However, they still couldn't get the blood of a 4-element mixed ability disaster level blood fiend, so they could only give up in the end. It was already getting late, so the 3 of them found a high-end hotel to check in. It's him. In a restaurant on the first floor of the hotel, many people were already eating. There were 4 young people at one of the tables, and Gray was slightly surprised to see a brown-haired young man among the 4. He didn't expect to meet him here. The brown-haired young man was the one who flirted with the young lady from the Manti family on the deck and was taught a lesson. However, he didn't think too much about it. He brought Fod and Kinsa to an empty table and sat down to order. Beastrice, don't let me get the chance or else I'll teach you a lesson. Miguel Vija finished a glass of red wine in one gulp and cursed angrily with a red face. From his slightly slurred speech, it wasn't hard to tell that he was a little drunk. The 3 young people beside him smiled awkwardly and didn't say anything. They knew who the brown-haired young man was talking about. That was someone their family couldn't afford to offend. Naturally, they didn't dare to say anything. After all, if that family found out what they said today, it would bring unimaginable trouble to their family. Why, you don't believe me? Seeing that the 3 young people didn't say anything, Miguel Vija suddenly felt very embarrassed. He slammed the table and glared at the 3 of them. Young Master Miguel, you drink too much. Let us send you back to your room to rest. The 3 young people smiled bitterly. Who said that? I'm not drunk. What are you looking at? Do you want to die? Miguel Vija stood up. His body swayed slightly as he supported himself on the table. He glared fiercely at his surroundings. Those who were glared at by him couldn't help but retract their gazes. Although there were a few tables of people who were unhappy, they could tell that the other party's identity wasn't ordinary from the way they dressed. They could only endure it. BT6. Extremely satisfied with this outcome, Miguel Vija smiled proudly. However, when he saw one of the tables, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. There were 3 people sitting at that table. Among the 3 of them, a woman had her back facing him. Her back view was very similar to a woman from the Manti family. B***TC, who dare not give me face? I'll F***CK, you to death. Under the influence of alcohol, his anger surged. He staggered over and reached out to grab the woman. The woman was none other than Kinsa. Blanca Manti was the same as Kinsa. Both of them had extremely perfect bodies. The difference was that Blanca Manti, who came from a top family, had more temperament while Kinsa's temperament was slightly weaker. Both of them had extremely perfect bodies. Naturally, their body shapes were quite similar. Adding on the fact that they both had brown hair, they looked exactly the same from the back. Adding on the effect of alcohol, Miguel Vija mistook Kinsa for Blanca Manti. Chapter 666. You got the wrong person. Facing the hand that was about to grab her, Kinsa was slightly shocked. She quickly dodged to the side while shouting out a warning. However, although Miguel Vija was already drunk, his strength was not weak. With her strength, it was impossible for her to dodge, and she was about to be grabbed by Miguel Vija. Whoosh! Between Kinsa and Miguel Vija, Gray appeared and blocked Miguel Vija with a cold face. Who are you? Get lost. Just as he was about to grab the Blanca Manti, he was suddenly blocked by someone. Under the influence of alcohol, Miguel Vija didn't care who the person was and angrily punched out. The one who should get lost is you. Gray's face was cold. Before he was hit by Miguel Vija's fist, his hand had already touched Miguel Vija. He didn't use too much strength, just a slight movement, and Miguel Vija's drunk body was sent flying. He knocked over several tables, and soup was all over his body. Young Master Miguel, Are you okay? At this time, the three young men at the same table with Miguel Villa finally caught up. The three of them quickly helped Miguel Villa up and wiped the soup off his body while angrily scolding him. You actually dared to attack young Master Miguel. Bastard, do you know who he is? I know, the top family, the Villa family, right? If he wants to take revenge after he sobers up, you can bring him to this hotel to find me. Gray coldly looked at the drunk Miguel Villa. Although he didn't cause trouble, he wasn't afraid of it either. With his current strength and FOD strength, a normal top family wouldn't be afraid of them. There was no need for him to swallow his anger. Let's go. Knowing that Miguel Villa was a top family disciple and still daring to attack him, he was either extremely daring or had something to rely on. It couldn't be seen which type Gray belonged to. The three of them helped Miguel Villa up and quickly walked out of the hotel. As for whether or not he wanted to take revenge, that was Miguel Villa's problem. It had nothing to do with the three of them. The three of them naturally had no obligation to take revenge. Moreover, if the other party's identity wasn't simple, wouldn't it bring trouble to their family? Even though the three of them were fooling around with Miguel Villa, they still knew what to do and what not to do. Gray didn't put this conflict in his eyes. After dinner, he returned to the hotel room. With my current realm, I can take another blood to transform. Which blood should I take? After thinking for a while, Gray took out the Misty monkey's blood and prepared to consume it to transform. Between super memory and the law of space ability was naturally more important. However, if he wanted to obtain the spatial rule power, he would have to undergo 2 transformations in a row. At his current level, he could only undergo 1 transformation for the time being. Even if he chose to consume the blood of a blood fiend that was related to the spatial rule power, he would not be able to obtain the spatial rule power immediately. If that was the case, he might as well consume the blood of the mist monkey, which had the super memory ability. The blood of the dense mist monkey was stored in a yellow crystal bottle. The name of the dense mist monkey was engraved on the surface of the crystal bottle. It even described the characteristics of the dense mist monkey's abilities in extremely concise words. Gray learned a little about the mist monkey from FOD. The mist monkey was a type of disaster-level blood fiend that lived in an environment shrouded in mist all year round. Visibility in an environment shrouded in mist all year round was extremely low, so it was easy to get lost. However, the mist monkey could move freely in such an environment and would never get lost. The reason was because of its super memory. The mist monkey's extraordinary memory allowed it to remember all the details of the places it passed by, down to the direction of a small branch. Then it could easily find its way back through these details. This was why it would never get lost. Gulp. After drinking the mist monkey blood, Gray's body began to change. He felt a sudden swelling pain in his head. It was as if his head had been forcefully stuffed with many things, causing it to swell. Super memory was a physical ability, and its specialty was naturally in the brain. The special structure of the brain gave it the ability to remember things with a single glance. Gray, who had swallowed the blood to transform, naturally had his brain modified. The brain was the most intricate part of all living creatures. It was extremely complex and mysterious. At this moment, Gray's most mysterious part was undergoing a mysterious transformation. The minute structure of the brain tissue was changing, such as the degree of wrinkles and the way it was arranged. The most subtle part, the brain cells, were also changing and transforming, becoming more efficient and more energetic. This change gave Gray the feeling that his brain was swollen, and the swelling was accompanied by pain. Beads of sweat slid down Gray's forehead. Unknowingly, Gray's hair and clothes were soaked with sweat. Gray gritted his teeth and endured. It was not until more than half an hour later that the swelling pain gradually disappeared and the transformation slowly ended. Opening his eyes and looking into the room, Gray had a feeling that what he saw was completely different from before. It was not that he could see more clearly. Gray's vision did not change at all. What he saw before was the same as what he saw now. The difference was that with just a glance, he had already completely memorized the layout of the room. At the head of the bed, there was a bedside table made of precious purple jade wood. On top of the bedside table, there was a simple rune lamp. The glass of the window was polished with blue crystal. The curtains were pure white and had purple flowers on them. The wardrobe was also made of purple jade wood and was placed on the right side of the room. There were a total of 20 purple jade wood clothes hangers in the wardrobe. Everything that Gray's eyes swept over, no matter how big or small, was completely memorized by Gray. Gray could accurately describe their positions and appearances. This was a very strange and wonderful feeling. Even with his eyes closed, he knew everything in the room extremely well. He could even walk around the room with his eyes closed. His precise memory allowed him to avoid the obstacles in the room. Is this the super memory ability? Although it cost me a chance to transform, it was completely worth it. The super memory ability could not increase one's combat strength, but Gray felt that it was completely worth it. Although the ability to increase one's combat strength was important, some auxiliary abilities were also extremely important. The importance of a good auxiliary ability was not inferior to an ability that could increase one's combat strength, and might even surpass it. The super memory ability could allow him to have a photographic memory and allow him to absorb knowledge at a speed that far exceeded that of an ordinary person. It was extremely important for him to find the blood of a blood fiend that was suitable for him. Moreover, this ability could also play an extremely important role in a dense forest that was like a maze. With this ability, it will be difficult for him to get lost in the forest from now on. Also, super memory isn't the only benefit I get from having a photographic memory. Thinking of this, Gray closed his eyes and carefully felt the ability in his body. When the blood meridians merged with the body, there would definitely be a feedback to the body. Through this method, he could unearth the characteristics of the ability that he usually did not notice. It actually formed a fusion with other abilities. A moment later, Gray opened his eyes, and there was a look of surprise in his eyes. The benefits that the super memory ability brought him was not only the photographic memory ability, but also an even greater surprise. In Gray's opinion, this surprise might even be more important than the photographic memory ability. It actually formed a fusion with the resurrection ability. The resurrection ability was an extremely important ability for Gray. With this ability, Gray could quickly obtain a group of loyal subordinates. However, this ability also had a drawback, and that was that it could not theoretically be the strongest. In theory, the current him could use the resurrection ability to resurrect existences that were at the calamity grade. However, in reality, because he had already resurrected a number of people, he could not resurrect calamity grade existences without raising his realm to the magic light level, unless there were special circumstances. He had always wanted to change this situation, and the method he thought of was naturally to change this drawback by fusing it with other abilities. However, as for what kind of ability could be fused with the resurrection ability to change this drawback, there were no records in any books, so he naturally did not know. But now, he unexpectedly discovered that he could fuse it with the resurrection ability just to obtain the photographic memory ability. It had to be said that it was a pleasant surprise. Although I can feel that it has fused with the resurrection ability, I can't feel the changes brought about by the fusion. I wonder if it's the kind that I'm looking forward to. After sensing it again, he still could not feel the characteristics of the newly fused resurrection ability. Gray could only give up and walked out of the room to take a bath. There, Kenshaw had already prepared hot water for him. Sure enough, as soon as he entered the bathroom, he saw the bathtub already prepared hot water. Other than that, there was also Kenshaw. She was wearing a thin gauze dress, and her private parts could be vaguely seen. She looked at Gray with a charming gaze, and her slender and voluptuous body was filled with extreme charm with her every frown and smile. They felt refreshed after the night. In the morning, Gray, Fod, and Kesha finished their breakfast in the restaurant on the first floor. Just as they were thinking about where they should go for a stroll in Chaos City, four uninvited guests dashed into the restaurant and went straight to Gray and the others. "Young Master Miguel, it's him. He's the one who attacked you last night." Among the four people, a young man pointed at Gray and shouted, These 4 people were the ones who had a conflict with him in the restaurant yesterday. Now that they were sober, they came looking for him. Brat, you're very arrogant. You actually dared to attack me. Miguel Vica glanced at Kinsa with a slightly heated gaze before turning his gaze to Gray. His eyes were filled with unfriendliness. It was really embarrassing last night. He actually mistook this woman for that stinky woman from the Manti family. However, this woman did look very similar to that stinky woman, and her figure was just as good as that woman's. No wonder he mistook her for someone else. Although the whole thing was a misunderstanding because he mistook her for someone else, it was a fact that this fellow attacked him, and that was something he could not tolerate. He was a disciple from a top family, and he was actually beaten up for no reason. If he did not take revenge, his reputation would be tarnished in the circle of disciples from top families. Hence, when he heard from his 3 companions that morning, he came looking for him immediately. Chapter 667. If you think I am crazy, then I am crazy. Gray looked at Miguel Vega. In the face of Miguel's unwavering gaze, his eyes remained calm from the beginning to the end, as if he didn't take Miguel seriously at all. That was the truth. He did not take him seriously. Now, if he used all his skills, he could fight an annihilation class. With that kind of power, he would not take him seriously. If he had an annihilation class elder with him, he would have to take him seriously. If it was just him and 3 other young masters, he would not take them seriously. Good. Very good. Miguel Vega's face became gloomy. As a member of a top family, he had a very high status and power. Even if he bullied others, most people would choose to swallow their anger. Even if they were not afraid of death, they had to worry about their family. Therefore, not many people dared to offend him. But recently, he had been offended by a lot of people. That B***TCH from the Manti family was one, and so was this kid. He could not take care of that B***TCH from the Manti family. In terms of status, she was higher than him. In terms of power, from the last fight, she was not weaker than him. After finding out that he had offended the other party, the elder leading the team called him over and sternly warned him not to provoke the other party again. Although he was very upset, he could only choose to give up on revenge. That was why he had drunk so much alcohol the day before. And now, there was actually someone who dared to provoke him. This made him extremely angry. After that bitch from the Mandy family stepped on his head, could it be that anyone would dare to step on his head now? Tell me, which family are you from? Let me see why you don't take my Vega family seriously. He looked at Gray with a gloomy expression. However, Gray's fearlessness made him feel a trace of worry in his heart. He was afraid that Gray was another family that he couldn't afford to offend like the Mandy family. Therefore, he probed, "The Leopold family." Gray glanced at Miguel Vega and said coldly. Of course, he couldn't mention the Fergus family. One of his purposes for coming to Chaos City was to use the Leopold family's name to obtain the right to enter the Tower of Trials. So he naturally had to mention the Leopold family. The Leopold family? Ha ha! Miguel Vica laughed maniacally, his laughter filled with mockery. In the anarchic lands, although there were quite a few top-tier clans, there weren't too many either. There were only a few dozen of them. Naturally, the top-tier clans knew each other well. From what he knew, the Leopold family was at the bottom of the top-class families. Some of the top-class families did not even think they were qualified to be called a top-class family. It was as if the family had only one Annihilation class elite who had reached Annihilation class through some weird method. Although his family couldn't compare to the top families like the Manti family, it was still far stronger than a family like the Leopold family. Immediately, his confidence grew. The Leopold clan, isn't that a top-notch clan? Someone actually dared to provoke him? Shoo, the other one has an even bigger background. He's also from a top family, and he's from a top family that's even stronger than the Leopold family. The conflict in the restaurant on the first floor was seen by many diners. Some of them were excited to see what was going on. Some of them were afraid of getting involved, so they quickly finished their meals and left the restaurant. There were also some people who were worried. They were the owner and the workers of the restaurant. They both came from top-class families, so they were not weak. If a fight broke out in the restaurant, perhaps their restaurant would be torn down. How could they not be worried? The owner went to the ear of one of the workers and said something. The worker ran out of the restaurant like a puff of smoke. No one knew where he was going. The top-class family, the Leopold family. What a powerful background. Miguel Vica's face was full of disdain. He did not try to hide it, but his face suddenly turned cold. You only have one annihilation class elite, and it's a fake family. How dare you act so arrogantly in front of the Vica family? Who gave you the guts? Is it that fake from the Leopold family? Listening to you, the Vica family seems to be stronger than the Leopold family. How many annihilation class elites does your Vica family have? His face did not change. Gray asked with interest. 3. The Vica family has 3 annihilation class elites, Miguel Vica proudly said. He thought Gray was just pretending to be calm because he was afraid, so Miguel Vica spoke with pride. 3? That's quite a lot. Gray was shocked. The Vica family was not the most powerful of the top-class families. Even so, they had 3 annihilation class elites. The Leopold family only had 1. One could imagine the difference between the top-class families. What do you think? Are you scared now? Miguel Vica's face was filled with pride. Then, he looked at Kinsa with a burning gaze. If you know what's good for you, kowtow and apologize to me. Let that woman serve me for one night. Otherwise, I will teach you a lesson. That stinky woman from the Manti family was too powerful to be messed with. He could not do anything to her. It made him feel bad. The woman in front of him had the same body as that stinky woman. They were both very attractive. He could not help but want to vent. While thinking about that stinky woman, he wanted to vent on this woman. It was going to feel great. What if I don't know what's good for me? Gray, who had been watching a clown's performance, looked cold. Kinshaw was his exclusive property. He would not allow anyone else to touch her. Even if she was not, he would not have agreed to such a ridiculous request. The Vica family's power was stronger than the Leopold family, but it was not enough to make him afraid. With his annihilation class power, Fod was one. The Bramble Disaster Crocodile was another. He had Time Rule power and Berserk power. It was not as if he did not have the power to fight. And this was only the calculation method of the separation. The Bramble Disaster Crocodile's body was too big. Gray's Time Rule power could not be used on the enemy. Even if it was used on the enemy, it could not be maintained for long. Fod was different. A normal person's body was enough for his Time Rule power to be used on him. It could be maintained for a long time. If he used Time Rule power to work with Fod's annihilation class speed would increase by a few times. He would not be afraid of 3 annihilation classes. If there was a big fight, the Vica family would be the one at a disadvantage. It would not be him or the Leopold family. Believe it or not, even if I cripple you, the Leopold family cannot do anything to me. Seeing that Gray was not threatened and was giving him a hard time, Miguel Vica's face was gloomy. He moved in front of Gray and looked at him coldly. Do you think you have the power to do that? Standing up, Gray smiled disdainfully. Although the other party was drunk the day before and had less than 10% of his power left, he could still roughly sense that the other party was only a 3rd stage king class. At this level, even if he had a rule class power, he could not be his opponent. Plus, the other party was a mid-tier family among the top families. How could he have a rule class blood skill and a rule class power? You are looking for death. Miguel Vica's face turned green. He clenched his fists. Cold, murderous intent spread out. He was ready to attack Gray, who was causing trouble. Suddenly, a scolding voice rang out. The employee who had just left the shop brought 3 people back into the shop. The 3 of them were wearing the same standard black and white battle suits. There was a strange pattern on their chests. The pattern was made up of many lines. It seemed to be twisting and turning without any pattern, but there was a rhythm to it. This was the symbol of the Chaos Holy Palace. The 3 of them were obviously from the Chaos Holy Palace. To be more precise, the 3 of them were law enforcers from the Chaos Holy Palace. The disciples of the top families, as well as the disciples of other families who wanted to see the grand event that happened once every 5 years, would definitely cause a lot of conflict. Hence, the Chaos Holy Palace had already sent more people to patrol all over Chaos City to maintain order. The 3 of them were one of them. What's going on? Don't you know that fighting is prohibited in Chaos City? The 3 of them, wearing the same battle suits, looked rather young. The one in the lead was a young man with red hair. He walked up to Gray and Miguel Vica and scolded them. Slivers of a terrifying aura spread out from his body. It enveloped Gray and Miguel Vica. That was the magic light level aura. Fighting is prohibited in Chaos City. If you want to fight, go to the dueling arena. Julio looked at the two of them with dissatisfaction. They were on the verge of fighting at any moment. As disciples of the Chaos Holy Palace, other than the fixed monthly resources, they could also exchange contribution points for resources by completing missions issued by the Chaos Holy Palace. This time, the Chaos Holy Palace issued a patrol mission. The mission was easy, and the contribution points were quite high. He immediately accepted it. Just now, he and two other disciples of the Chaos Holy Palace who had also accepted the patrol mission were patrolling the streets. A man dressed like a shop assistant rushed over to report that someone was causing trouble in their shop. He and the other two immediately rushed over. He really hated these disciples who had nothing better to do. He had already dealt with dozens of such cases in the past few days. Magic light level. And so young, seeing what the three of them were wearing and sensing the red-haired man's aura, Miguel Vica's expression changed drastically. He quickly loosened his clenched fists. He dared to be arrogant in front of the Leopold family, but he didn't dare to be arrogant in front of the three of them. Not to mention his Vica family. Even the top few families among the top families didn't dare to do so. However, he really didn't want to let them go just like that. His gaze flickered, and he looked at Gray with a cold smirk. He raised his head to provoke him. "Kid, do you dare to go to the dueling arena with me?" Chapter 668. Your provocation is too low level. Gray looked at Miguel Vega as if he was looking at an idiot. This extremely clumsy provocation was definitely the most clumsy provocation he had ever seen. The level of provocation was so low that it was unbearable to look at. Gray had never used provocation before, and he didn't know if he would have the chance to do so in the future. However, if he was in Vega's shoes, he would probably first greet the other party's relatives and completely infuriate them before saying, "Do you dare to fight with me?" That would definitely increase his chances of success by several times. "What, you don't dare?" Seeing that Gray wasn't provoked, Miguel Vega became slightly anxious. There were people from the Chaos Temple present, and if the other party didn't accept his challenge, he wouldn't be able to do anything to the other party. So he quickly provoked him again. "I've already said that your provocation level is too low, and you still don't know how to improve. You keep repeating the same two sentences over and over again. I really feel anxious for you." Gray shook his head slightly, looking as if he wasn't provoked at all. Just when Miguel Vega had lost all hope, he suddenly changed the topic. "However, I accept your challenge. If there's a fly jumping around beside you, it's better to just slap it away and end it once and for all." The reason why he agreed was naturally not because he had been provoked by Miguel Vega's clumsy provocation. After weighing the pros and cons, he felt that it would be easier to teach the other party a lesson and beat the other party into submission. So he chose to accept the other party's challenge. "Do you want to fight on the stage?" Julio looked at Gray and Miguel Vega playfully, but he didn't say anything to stop them. It was fine as long as the two of them didn't fight in public. As for the two of them fighting to the death on the stage, that had nothing to do with him. Even if one of them died because of it, no one would dare to find trouble with him. At this moment, he was representing the Chaos Temple on a patrol mission. He represented the Chaos Temple, and if anyone dared to make a move against him, they would definitely suffer the Chaos Temple's thunderous wrath. Throughout history, the top families that had been destroyed one after another had already explained the consequences and price of angering the Chaos Temple. He believed that no family would dare to try it. "Let's go to the stage. There's a good show to watch." Interesting. Both of them are disciples of top clans. Their strength is definitely not weak. This battle is going to be interesting. I have to inform everyone first. Otherwise, they will blame me for not informing them where's a good show to watch. The conflict in the hotel not only alarmed the people in the hotel, but also some people on the street. At this time, when they heard that the two people were going to fight on the stage, there was a sudden burst of excited cheers. Since there was a free fight to watch, they were naturally very happy to watch it. Some people hurriedly called their friends over, and the reason for the conflict between the two was also spread. The battle platform in the southeast of Chaos City was about 2 to 3 kilometers away from the hotel. This was a square battle platform that covered an area of about a few thousand square meters. It was built with precious rune materials and reinforced with a high-level runic array. It was also connected to the giant runic array in Chaos City. Even a 5th-tier magic light battle wouldn't be able to leave a mark on the battle platform. During the battle, there would be a square, translucent barrier around the battle platform, which could completely block the attacks inside. Gray's trio and Miguel Vica's group of 4 hadn't arrived yet, but many people had already arrived around the battle platform. They had already taken up a good spot and were waiting. There was no lack of disciples from top clans among them. The 2 disciples from top clans on the battle platform were very likely to be their next opponents. They naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity to observe their opponent's strength. The 2 horse-drawn carriages were forced to stop quite a distance away from the battle platform, and Gray's trio and Miguel Vica's group of 4 walked out from the carriages. Seeing the arrival of the 2 parties, the onlookers consciously made a path to the battle platform. Gray's trio and Miguel Vica's group walked to the battle platform without any obstructions. "What's going on? Why are you on the battle platform with someone?" Suddenly, a few people blocked Miguel Vica's path. The leader was a tall, skinny old man with white eyebrows. There were middle-aged people and young people in the group. The tall, skinny old man frowned and looked at Miguel Vica. Seeing the old man, Miguel Vica instinctively felt a bit scared. He had no choice but to add fuel to the fire. That guy was too arrogant. He didn't take the Vica family seriously. I was angry, so I challenged him to a duel. He didn't take the Vica family seriously? Hearing Miguel Vica's embellished words, a cold glint flashed across the tall and skinny old man's eyes. He looked at Gray and the other 2, then at Fod, and said with a fake smile, "I was wondering who dared to look down on the Vica family. It is the Leopold family, which is at the bottom of the top-class families." He was Annihilation class elite from the Vica family. He was also the leader of the Vica family. He had seen Fod, who was also an Annihilation class elite. Of course, they did not have a good relationship. Because of how Fod had become an Annihilation class elite, the Leopold family had been pushed aside. The news that the Leopold family was not a top-class family had spread far and wide because of the Vica family. The reason they did that was because of the benefits. The fewer top-class families there were, the more benefits the top-class families would receive. The more top-class families there were, the fewer benefits the top-class families would receive. "I'm too lazy to explain why," the tall, skinny old man coldly said. "If you want to know, go and find out. But you should prepare your high-class healing medicine." Facing the tall, skinny old man's mockery, Fod did not look happy. He spoke coldly. He knew Gray's power very well. He could imagine what would happen to the Vica family student. "No need. You should worry about your Leopold family student," the tall, skinny old man argued. While Fod and the tall, skinny old man were arguing, Gray and Miguel Vica were already in the battleground. The battleground shield had been activated. For that, Gray and Miguel Vica each paid 1,000 magic power coins. After all, activating the shield required magic power crystals. It is those 2, in the corner of the battleground, where the view was good, Blanca Manti appeared. Her little brother and some people from the Manti family were with her. At this moment, she had some impression of the 2 people standing on the battle stage, which surprised her slightly. Go and find out what caused this conflict. She was curious about the reason for the conflict between the 2, so she gave an order to a servant. The servant quickly left and came back after a while to tell her what he had heard. Humph, the Vica family. With her intelligence, she could naturally guess who the bitch Miguel Vica was talking about was. The reason for the conflict was because of her. Blanca Mandy's face couldn't help but turn cold. She couldn't help but feel a little apologetic toward this child of the Leopold family. After all, this child of the Leopold family had suffered an undeserved disaster. On the battleground, Gray and Miguel Vica stood at opposite ends of the battleground. "Kid, you are so stupid. You don't even know your opponent's strength, and yet you dare to enter the battleground." Miguel Vica was not in a hurry to attack Gray. He had a sinister smile on his face. He was a direct descendant of the Vika family. He was also one of the people recommended by the Vika family to enter the trial tower. His strength was naturally not weak. At his age, he was already a top genius with the strength of a third-layer king. Only the disciples of the top families or the disciples of the temple could surpass him in terms of strength. In addition, he had the adaptability of mixed abilities. The blood arts he cultivated were a mix of ice and fire. His battle strength was enough to reach the last layer of the king rank, the fourth-layer king rank. There were very few people in the king rank who could be his opponent, and his opponent came from the Leopold family, which was at the bottom of the top families. How strong could he be? The opponent did not even know his strength before accepting his challenge. He had to admit that the opponent was really stupid. Let's begin. Facing the sinister smile on Miguel Vika's face, Gray's expression was extremely calm. He did not want to say too much. There was no need for that. The results were often more convincing than words. The results would prove who was the real idiot. All right, kid. Since you want to be tortured early, I will satisfy you. Miguel Vika's eyes revealed a dangerous glint. A red and white spear appeared in his hand. Whoosh! The meaning of extreme spread out. The temperature of the entire battleground changed. A terrifying chill spread out. With Miguel Vika as the center, the chill spread towards Gray. On the ground, ice quickly spread towards Gray. The ice and fire fusion ability was an ability that was formed from the combination of the ice and fire attributes. This ability had two characteristics. One was extreme cold, and the other was extreme heat. Right now, he was using the extreme cold ability. The extreme cold spread out and covered the entire battleground. Gray cannot dodge at all. He was about to be frozen by the extreme cold. At that moment, Gray reached out his hand. He did not hold any weapons. Instead, he gently fanned his hand in front of him like he was fanning dust. Instantly, an icy green frost wind blade appeared and attacked Miguel Vija from all directions. Puff! The extreme cold was torn apart. In front of the ice-green wind blades, the extreme cold seemed to have met its nemesis. Not only was it unable to freeze or destroy the wind blades, it was easily torn apart. Countless frost wind blades rapidly attacked Miguel Vega. What? His confident attack was easily broken apart, and he was surrounded by countless wind blades. He was in danger. The sinister smile on Miguel Vica's face turned into shock. He suddenly realized that his opponent did not understand his strength, and he did not understand his opponent's strength either. The words he used to ridicule his opponent could not be more suitable to be used on himself. Puff, puff, puff. There was no time to dodge. The wind blades had already attacked his body and completely surrounded him. Chapter 669. Moments later, the ice wind blades disappeared and Miguel Vija's figure was revealed. He had slid to the edge of the stage under the attack of the ice wind blades, sticking close to the stage's defensive barrier. However, the injuries on his body were not serious. There were only some scratches on his hands. As for where he was wearing the armor, there were no visible wounds. As a disciple of a top family, the armor on his body was naturally not of a low grade. Plus, Gray had only used the mixed ability of two elements, so the power was only at the level of a normal magic light. Therefore, he was unable to break through the armor's defense. Miguel Vija looked at Gray with an ashen face. He originally thought that his strength was enough to crush his opponent, but he never thought that his opponent's strength would be enough to crush him. If it wasn't for the armor on his body, he would have been seriously injured. This made him very confused. His opponent was just a disciple of the bottom family among the top families. How could he be stronger than him? Wearing a layer of turtle shell, is this what gives you the confidence to challenge me? Step by step, Gray walked towards Miguel Vija. His voice carried a hint of mockery, and as he walked towards Miguel Vija's expression became more and more tense. Hula, unable to withstand the pressure, Miguel Vija attacked again despite knowing that he was no match for Gray. Crimson flames spread out and surged towards Gray. Gray didn't stop moving forward, but the ice wind blades appeared again. They easily extinguished the crimson flames and slashed towards Miguel Vija. The powerful impact forced Miguel Vija to stick to the defensive barrier, unable to move. Moments later, the ice wind blades disappeared. Miguel Vija, who had a few more wounds on his exposed hand, heaved a sigh of relief. However, his expression quickly changed as he saw a foot flying towards him. Bang! This foot ruthlessly stomped on his face that wasn't protected by his armor. His nose caved in as blood continuously flowed out from his nose and mouth. Miguel Vija's entire body flew out horizontally as a clear shoe print appeared on his face. Without the protection of his armor, Miguel Vija's injuries from Gray's kick weren't light. He was even stunned and couldn't get up immediately. When he wanted to get up, a foot had already stepped on his body. With this kind of strength, you dare to be arrogant in front of me? Are you stupid, or am I stupid? Looking down at Miguel Vega from above, Gray's face was full of mockery. He didn't want to cause trouble, but he wasn't afraid of trouble either. Since they had come knocking on his door, he would just step on them. He was actually being stepped on. Miguel Vija was so angry that his face turned ashen. He struggled with all his might, wanting to flip Gray over. Unfortunately, Gray, who had reached the 4th level of the King's stage, was a level higher than him. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break free. Pung! Raising his foot, he kicked Miguel Vija's head and waist. Miguel Vija, who was lying on the ground, immediately slid out and crashed into the defensive barrier at the edge of the stage. Even with the protection of the battle armor, he was still knocked dizzy. Pung! 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 Gray's body flashed. He kept kicking. Miguel Vija rolled around the stage. His face was bruised and swollen. Even his parents wouldn't be able to recognize him. I give up. I give up. He felt very frustrated and scared. He was afraid that Gray would kill him. So Miguel Vija quickly gave up. As he gave up, the defensive barrier was removed. An elder quickly rushed over. It was the Annihilation class elder from the Vija family. He coldly looked at Gray, but he didn't attack Gray. He didn't dare break the rules of the Chaos Holy Palace. Beside Gray, Fod quickly appeared. Moving his foot away from Miguel Vija, Gray looked at the tall, skinny elder. He then followed Fod down the stage. He knew that he had offended the Vija family, but he didn't care. If not offending them meant that he had to swallow his anger, he was willing to offend them. Most importantly, the Vija family did not have what it took to make him swallow his anger. Miguel Vija? That is just a joke. The two sides that were in conflict left. The people around the stage also left. Some of the children of the top family smirked. They looked in the direction that Miguel Vija had left with disdain. The Leopold family. Interesting. Some of the children of the top families looked in the direction that Gray had left. Their strongest combat power had reached the level of magic light. It was enough to pose a threat to them. Of course, that was all there was to it. He was a threat, but that didn't mean he was a match for them. A child of the Leopold family, Julio turned around and walked into the crowd with his two companions. He had reached the level of magic light at such a young age. His position in the Chaos Holy Palace was not simple. He was one of the children that the Chaos Holy Palace focused on. He had already been given a chance to enter the trial tower. His instincts told him that they might meet again. That would be the time when the trial tower opened. Although the Leopold family was at the bottom of the top families, there were many who were stronger than them. His instincts told him that one of the chances might fall into the hands of the other. It really does feel strange. Blanca Mandy looked as if she was thinking. The child of the Leopold family had won. It made her feel relieved. The guilt in her heart lessened. At the same time, she felt even more confused. When she observed the relationship between the Leopold family's Annihilation class elite and the child of the Leopold family, she noticed that their relationship was very strange. It was not like the relationship between an elder and a child. It had been a few days since the last duel. The duel between the children of two top families had maintained its popularity for a day or two, but it was quickly replaced by other exciting news. During this time, too many factions had entered Chaos City. Most of them were a group of hot-blooded young people. As a result, there were people in the city who went to the duel every day because of conflicts. However, Many people knew that the conflict between the Vika family and the Leopold family had been settled. Sooner or later, there would be another fight because of this conflict. After breakfast, Gray and the other two rented a carriage. They left the hotel and went to the center of Chaos City. If someone who was not a member of the Chaos Holy Palace wanted to enter the Trial Tower, they had to be recommended by a top family. Then, the Chaos Holy Palace would select them according to some rules. Every top family had a recommendation quota. The Leopold family was at the bottom of the top families, but they also had a recommendation quota. Now, they were going to use that recommendation quota on Gray. Chaos City was very big. Conservatively speaking, it was a city with a population of at least 10 million. The carriage traveled for more than half an hour before they arrived at the Chaos Holy Palace in the center of the city. The Chaos Holy Palace was a very big palace. Looking around, one could not see the end of the palace. It was built with a kind of golden jade stone. Golden jade stone was a very hard room material. It looked like white jade, but on the surface of the white jade, there were lines like golden silk. That was how it got its name. The entire Chaos Holy Palace was built with this kind of room material. The cost could not be measured by magic coins. It showed how rich the Chaos Holy Palace was. A group of blood warriors was guarding the palace door. They were wearing black and white battle suits. One could clearly feel a murderous aura coming from them. After introducing themselves, Gray and the other two were led to a very big hall. At this time, there were many people sitting in the hall. Most of them were old or middle-aged men with one or a few young people. Obviously, this group of people was like them. They were here for the right to enter the trial tower. Oomph! A cold snort entered Gray's ears. Gray looked in the direction of the sound and saw a few people sitting in the hall. They were the people from the Vigia family. The one who snorted was a young man with brown hair. It was Miguel Vigia. At this moment, the other party's broken nose had already recovered to such an extent. Natural recovery was obviously impossible in just a few days. The other party had used a healing potion, and just as Fod had said, it was a high-grade healing potion. Only such a high-grade healing potion could heal broken bones so quickly. Gray couldn't be bothered to pay any attention to him and shifted his gaze away. Unlike the other party, who was here for the qualifications to enter the trial tower, Gray was here for the qualifications to enter. Moreover, he absolutely had to obtain one of the slots. There was no need for him to clash with the other party here. If he offended the Chaos Holy Palace because of this, it would be too much of a loss for him to participate in the trial. Seeing Gray ignore him and treat him like air, Miguel Vigia was angry. It was like he was thinking about how Gray had stepped on him in the arena and looked at him with disdain. He wanted to provoke him even more, but the tall, skinny old man looked at him with dissatisfaction. He quickly stopped. After waiting in the hall for a while, a few more people from the top families arrived. The people from the Chaos Holy Palace finally showed up. The leader was a middle-aged man who looked like he was in his 40s. Of course, that was just how he looked. His actual age was much older. The middle-aged man was tall and big. His face was square. He was wearing a loose black robe. There was a gold Chaos Holy Palace symbol on it. The black robe meant he was an Annihilation class elite. In the Chaos Holy Palace, only Annihilation class elites had the right to wear a black robe with a gold symbol on it. The man's body gave off a dangerous presence that made the Annihilation class elites feel threatened. It meant he was a very strong Annihilation class elite. Many of the top families there were led by Annihilation class elites. Only elites of that level could intimidate the Annihilation class elites. Chapter 670. Since all the top families are here, let's begin. This time, there will be 5 spots to enter the Tower of Trials. As usual, the spots will be decided through battles. The recommended disciples of each family come up and draw a number. The 2 numbers next to each other will be your opponent. The one with no opponent will be given a bye. The black-robed man's voice clearly traveled into everyone's ears. Everyone quickly understood the rules. The recommended disciples of each top family would fight each other through drawing numbers. The winner would enter the next round, while the loser would be eliminated. The last 5 people would be given a spot to enter the Tower of Trials. The 2 numbers next to each other would be their opponent. Simply put, number 1 against number 2, number 3 against number 4, and so on. If the last person had no opponent, then he would be given a bye to the next round. It was a very simple and fair rule. The test was also very simple: strength and luck. The stronger one would naturally be able to eliminate his opponent and advance to the next round. If he was lucky, he would be given a bye and advance to the next round. Gray could roughly understand the purpose of such a rule. Strength was obviously important, but sometimes luck was also extremely important. In some extremely dangerous situations, the stronger ones would die, while the weaker ones would survive. This kind of thing was very common. Number 36. Following the other disciples of the top families, Gray went up to draw a number. In the end, he received a white jade plate with the number 36 engraved on it. He waved his number 36 and looked for his number 35. Then, he saw a young man with a chubby face come up and say, "Brother, I'm number 35. Please have mercy on me. Please have mercy on me later." The chubby young man was almost on top of Gray as he said, with a fawning expression, "Brother, I know I'm not your opponent. Give me some face. Please don't do it like you did with Miguel Vega. That's very embarrassing. If your performance this time is too bad, you'll be beaten by my grandfather when you go back. For the sake of your brothers, but you must give me some face. I'll try my best." He actually met such a person. The corner of Gray's mouth twitched. He was really annoyed by the young man's harassment and could only give a perfunctory reply. "Thanks, brother. I'm Avery Lenini. If you come to Lenini City in the future, I will definitely treat you." The slightly plump young man, Avery Lenini, had a grateful look on his face. He wanted to give Gray a hug, but was stopped by Gray. He had no intention of hugging a grown man. After all, he was still quite decent in that aspect. Moreover, the other party's words made Gray speechless. Inviting him to Lenini City was something that only stingy people could do. Number 1 and number 2 go to the battle stage. The group of people moved to a battle stage that was only 100 meters away from the hall. The slightly plump young man shamelessly squeezed his way to Gray's side. On the stage, a man from the Chaos Sanctum who had followed the middle-aged man spoke. Immediately, 2 people walked towards the battle platform. One of them was wearing a white battle suit with blue edges. His blue hair was slightly long and was tied up with a hairband. Coupled with his handsome face, he looked very handsome. Below the battle platform, many women looked at him. The other person was wearing a green battle suit. His figure was only average, and his appearance was also quite ordinary. No matter how one looked at him, he was an extremely ordinary person. The appearance of the two could be said to be 2 extremes. It was like a tall, rich, and handsome man versus a short, frustrated man. The result of the battle was the complete opposite of the appearance. The ordinary-looking man defeated the handsome man very easily. From the way the ordinary-looking man handled the battle with ease, he must have preserved a large part of his strength. That's the son of the top family, the Ngumo family. The people of this family are all like this. In fact, the wives of this family are all very beautiful. It's a pity that the bloodline of this family is too strong. No matter how beautiful the wives are, the descendants of this family are all ordinary. Avery Lenini teased. But there are also benefits. At least you don't have to worry about being cuckolded without knowing it. What level is the Ngumo family at among the top families? There was actually such a strange family. Gray could not help but feel a little interested and asked, "No way? You don't even know this?" Avery Lenini looked at Gray as if he was looking at a monster. His stare made Gray's hair stand on end. He could only say that he usually focused on cultivation and did not pay much attention to these things. No wonder you're so strong." Avery Lenini had a look of realization as he introduced Grayson to him. The number of top families in the anarchic lands is not many, but it's not few either. There are a total of 43 of them. The 3 strongest families are the Lopez family, the Manti family, and the last family is the Ngumo family. In fact, when we fight for the spots to enter the Tower of Trials, we fight for the remaining 2 spots. Almost every time, the 3 spots are taken by the children of these 3 families. We don't have a share at all. The Lopez family, the Manti family, and the Ngumo family. The 3 strongest families? Gray was somewhat curious. He memorized the names of these 3 families in his mind. Of course, with his current super memory ability, it was difficult for him to forget them after hearing them once. Number 3 and 4, please come up. Number 5 and 6, please come up. On the battle stage, the battle was still ongoing. The children of the top families who were called went up to battle in pairs. Occasionally, someone would be injured. The spots to enter the Tower of Trials that only opened once every 5 years were extremely precious. As a result, the children of the top families used all their means to fight for the spots. Because of this, it was impossible to hold back. Naturally, injuries were unavoidable. However, no one was crippled or killed. After all, they were only fighting for the right to enter the Tower of Trials. They were not mortal enemies. Naturally, there was no need to cripple or fight to the death. Therefore, the men on the battle stage would intervene in time when there was a possibility of death or crippling. This guy's luck is not bad. Among the participants, Gray saw Miguel Vija. Miguel Vija was quite lucky. His opponent was introduced by Avery Lenini, who was blabbering nonstop beside him. Miguel was a member of a bottom-tier family that was not much stronger than the Leopold family. This time, there was no unexpected failure. Miguel successfully defeated the child of the bottom family and entered the next round. Blanca Manti, it's Blanca Manti's turn. Suddenly, the chubby man beside Gray became excited. Gray was startled by the man's nervous behavior. He looked at the battle stage and saw 2 women walk up to the battle stage. One of the women was wearing a light yellow battle suit. She was petite and belonged to the cute type. However, the chubby man and most of the young people present were not looking at her. Instead, they were looking at her opponent. She was wearing a blue battle suit for women. Many parts of her body had been specially adjusted for women. Not only was her perfect figure not covered, it was even more prominent. Her breasts were high, her buttocks were perky, her waist was slender, and there was a pair of purple earrings dangling from her earlobes. Her slender and white neck. There was not a single part of her that was not attractive. The most attractive part was the pair of slender and round legs that were wrapped in the blue pants. Even Gray could not help but look twice. The chubby man beside Gray was even drooling. His eyes were fixed on the woman's legs. He even whispered, "I can play for 3 years, no, 10 years. His words scared Gray so much that he quickly took a few steps away from the woman. He drew a clear line between them to prevent the woman from being discovered by the Manti family and being implicated. The Manti family was one of the 3 strongest families among the top families. He did not want to provoke such a family, especially because of an unexpected disaster. F***K, so cruel. However, the man's drooling appearance was quickly scared away. On the battle stage, before the petite woman could react, Blanca Manti had already used her terrifying speed to appear beside the petite woman. She swung her long legs and kicked the petite woman away. The speed she displayed was definitely at the level of magic light. For the sake of his own life, the woman decisively put on a straight face. She was a completely different person from before. It was hard to associate her with the drooling appearance just now. The battle ended with Blanca Manti's victory. As her opponent, the petite woman had almost no power to fight back. She barely blocked a few attacks, but in the end, in the face of the absolute difference in strength, she could only open her mouth and admit defeat. After a few more battles, on the battle stage, the man who was in charge of the battle announced loudly, "Number 35 and number 36, please come to the stage." Coming, we're coming." Avery Lenini waved his hand, indicating that he and Gray were here. It was as if he and Gray were very close, which attracted a lot of attention. After all, as competitors, it was the first time they had seen such a close relationship. "Brother, don't forget what you just promised me," Avery Lenini whispered as he walked, afraid that Gray would forget what he had just promised. The corner of Gray's mouth twitched, but he felt that this chubby man was very interesting. If the conditions allowed, it was not impossible to defeat him in a dignified manner, as a way to thank him for his explanation. Chapter 671. You may begin. The defensive barrier of the battle stage rose as the man in charge of the battle spoke. After winking at Gray and once again reminding him not to forget, Avery Lenini's expression suddenly turned serious. It was originally an extremely serious expression, but it was completely distorted on his slightly chubby face. Not only did it not look serious, but it also made people want to laugh. A battle sword appeared in his hand. With a low roar, his slightly chubby body trembled violently as he viciously slashed out with his sword. Then, a purple lightning bolt appeared, accompanied by crackling sounds as it attacked Gray. Feeling the power of the purple lightning bolt, Gray's mouth twitched. He suddenly regretted agreeing to the other party's request to save some face and not let the other party lose too badly. It was not that the other party was too strong, but that the other party was too weak, so weak that it was a complete mess. The other party was only at the second tier of the king stage, and the blood technique he cultivated was also an extremely ordinary lightning blood technique. Cultivating a hybrid technique required a corresponding aptitude. As a top family, although the other party's family should have a hybrid blood technique, it was obvious that the other party did not have the aptitude in this area. With such weak strength, he still needed to cooperate and not let the other party lose too badly. The challenge difficulty was really too high. However, since he had already agreed, and his impression of the fatty was not bad, Gray could only reluctantly cooperate. Swish! A green wind blade, whose power had been weakened by Gray again and again, was slashed out to meet the purple lightning bolt. Boom! With an explosion, the green wind blade and purple lightning both dissipated. The aftershock spread in all directions and finally dissipated completely. Evenly matched, this was a clash of evenly matched strengths. Avery Lenini cast a grateful look at Gray. Purple lightning wrapped around his battle sword as he powerfully slashed at Gray. Gray was helpless. He could only wrap his sword with a layer of green light and meet the other party's battle sword. Of course, the wind ability attached to the sword and the strength used were all at the second tier of the king stage. Clang! The sword and saber clashed. Purple and green flashed at the point of collision, producing a sizzling sound. Then, the two of them were shaken back by the force of the impact. However, they quickly stabilized their bodies and pressed towards each other again. Clang, clang, clang. The two of them continued to fight on the battle stage. One moment, they would fight from the east side of the battle stage to the west side, and the next moment, they would fight from the west side to the south side of the battle stage. Their abilities were constantly being used, and the battle situation was extremely tense. Below the stage, because Gray had participated in a battle before and had defeated Miguel Vica, who wasn't too weak, many young people were paying attention to this battle. They wanted to use this battle to determine Gray's strength. Although they might not encounter him, it would be good if they did. That's all you got? Was there something wrong with Miguel Vica's head? You actually lost to such a guy? Some of the top clan's disciples who hadn't seen the duel had strange expressions on their faces. They almost thought that they had seen wrongly. His realm was only at the second stage of the king stage, and his blood arts were only of a single element. Yet, such a guy had actually defeated Miguel Vica. They really couldn't believe it. Could it be that Miguel Vica purposely released a smokescreen? Some of the top clan's disciples who hadn't seen the duel had doubts in their hearts. They secretly guessed that the previous duel might have been a smokescreen purposely released by Miguel Vica. His goal was to make everyone lower their guard against him and be careless. That guy really isn't that weak. Facing the many pairs of mocking, suspicious, and vigilant gazes, Miguel Vica felt like crying. He really wanted to stand up and fight Gray again to prove Gray's strength. Gray's strength didn't matter to him, but the strength of Gray, who had defeated him, was his concern. If the person who had defeated him was weak, wouldn't that mean that he was even weaker? Unbeknownst to Miguel Vica below the stage, he was already on the verge of tears. The battle on the stage was still ongoing. It was still the same, evenly matched situation that made Miguel Vica break down. The battle situation kept changing. One moment, one person had the advantage. The next moment, the other person had the advantage. Dang, dang, dang. After exchanging blows for a few more minutes, this evenly matched battle finally ended. Gray had narrowly defeated Avery Lenini in one move and won the battle. Thanks, brother. Losing to Gray by one move Avery Lenini was obviously very satisfied with this result. With this result, he wouldn't be spanked by his old man when he went back. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and moved closer to Gray with a face full of gratitude. He was probably the only one who would be so happy after losing. Among the top clan's disciples below the stage, many didn't know Gray's strength, but he, who had watched the duel, naturally knew. He knew that Gray was giving him face so that he wouldn't lose too badly. Just stand there. The corner of Gray's mouth twitched. He kept a distance from Avery Lenini, afraid that the latter would rub his sweaty hands on his body. After this battle, he felt even more tired than the battle with Miguel Villa. It was mainly because he was mentally tired. Maintaining the strength and realm of a second-tier king was very difficult. After that, 3 more battles were held. The first round of battles was over. The person who drew number 43 and didn't have an opponent was a short young man. He excitedly showed his number to the man who was in charge of the battle. Although he had been given a bye, it didn't mean that he had obtained the right to enter the trial tower. However, at least his chances were better than those who had been eliminated in the first round. At least he still had a chance, while these people had no chance at all. It was already close to noon, and the second round of battles had yet to begin. The remaining battles would be held in the afternoon. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the trial tower competition and the others left. All the top clan's disciples were led to a restaurant for a meal. Sorry, my family's disciple won by luck. I hope you don't mind. Don't mention it, don't mention it. I just hope that the noble family's disciple won't fall in the second round. Falling when there's only 1 round left to obtain the right to enter the trial tower is not a good feeling. The atmosphere of the meal was not harmonious. After all, there had just been a battle between the clans. Some had lost, some had won. Naturally, there would be some who were proud and some were mocking. Is the Chaos Temple doing this on purpose? Feeling the vile atmosphere, Gray couldn't help but have a mischievous guess. Could it be that the reason why the Chaos Temple would throw out 5 slots for the trial tower every time the trial tower opened was to incite endless conflict between the top clans, making it impossible for them to unite? If all the top clans joined forces, they would definitely be a force to be reckoned with. Even the Chaos Temple would have to be wary of them. The Chaos Temple's reason for throwing out the slots for the trial tower was to break this possible alliance. Forget it. This has nothing to do with me. Gray wasn't sure if this was the Chaos Temple's goal, but he didn't care. He was quite satisfied with the food provided by the Chaos Temple. High-grade blood fiend meat and magic herbs as supplementary ingredients not only had a unique taste, but also had extremely high nourishing effects. And this was what Gray liked the most. After all, his appetite had always been good. He liked such high-nutrition food the most. On his right sat Kenshaw and Fod, and on his left sat Avery Lenini. This guy shamelessly sat next to Gray again, but he soon regretted sitting next to Gray. "Brother, eat more." With a look of sincerity, Gray ordered another steak for Avery Lenini. "I really can't eat anymore." Looking at the steak in front of him again, Avery Lenini was on the verge of tears. In order to take revenge for the difficult problem Avery Lenini gave him on the battle stage today, Gray kept persuading Avery Lenini to eat. Of course, at the same time, he was also gorging himself to set an example. When Gray first persuaded him, Avery Lenini didn't care at all. His prideful physique was all due to eating. In terms of appetite, he dared to say that no one present could beat him. So he didn't refuse and directly competed with Gray. The result was obvious. In front of Gray, who had a huge appetite after his second metamorphosis, he was quickly defeated. Fortunately, he was already eliminated and didn't have a battle. Otherwise, it would definitely affect his condition in the afternoon. "Young Master Gray, wipe your mouth." After finishing his meal, Gray took the napkin from Kenshaw and wiped his mouth under Avery Lenini's envy. When he saw Kenshaw for the first time, his eyes were glued to her. Kenshaw's body wasn't inferior to Blanca's, and he almost drooled. When Gray looked at him with an unfriendly gaze, he quickly restrained himself and muttered softly, my bad. I shouldn't covet my friend's wife." After finishing their meal, everyone went to the battle stage. Not long after, the middle-aged man and the others who appeared in the morning appeared again. They didn't say much and just let Gray and the others who successfully made it to the next round go on stage to draw a number. Number 19. After glancing at the number, Gray hurriedly put it away. He was really afraid of meeting another person like Avery Lenini. Number 1 and number 2, please come on stage. Number 3 and number 4, please come on stage. Group after group of people went up the stage to fight. Just as Avery Lenini had said, the children of the 3 strongest families all advanced easily, without exception. According to Gray's estimations, the 3 of them should have reached the demon light boundary. As for whether the blood arts they cultivated were single-attribute blood arts or mixed together, that wasn't easy to judge. This was because up until now, no one had been able to force them to use their full strength. Among them, the descendant of the Lopez family was a blond young man. Unlike Landru and Gummo, whose appearance and strength didn't match, his appearance and strength were extremely compatible. Not only was he strong, but he was also extremely handsome, attracting the attention of many young women. Number 19 and number 20, please come on stage. With fewer people participating in the battle, the second round soon came to an end. It was Gray's turn to fight his opponent, who should be the second last to go on stage. Gray and his opponent walked out from the crowd and walked onto the battle stage. It's actually you. Gray's opponent was a young man who looked passable, but his slightly collapsed nose affected his overall appearance. When he saw that his opponent was actually Gray, his face lit up and he laughed hysterically. Chapter 672. Why are you so happy to see me? Gray looked at the man with the flat nose with a strange expression. Could it be that all his opponents were strange? Avery Lenini was like that, and so was this man with the flat nose. Happy, of course I'm happy. The man with the flat nose was pleasantly surprised. When he heard Gray's question, he smiled proudly. My opponent is you. How could I not be happy? Is that so? As long as you're happy. Gray shrugged. He had a rough idea of why the man was so happy. It was probably because, in the previous battle, the man had mistaken him for a second-tier king. What could he say about that? As long as the man was happy, it was fine. This guy's luck is really good. He's definitely going to enter the next round. If only my opponent was that guy from the Leopold family, I would definitely be able to enter the next round as well. Below the stage, some of the disciples of the top families who had lost looked regretful and envious. Their jealous gazes almost drowned Gray's opponent. Why didn't they have such good luck to meet such an opponent? This guy must have stepped in *T when he left the house. Begin. The defensive barrier of the stage rose. The man from the Chaos Temple, who was in charge of the battle, ordered Gray and the man with the flat nose. As long as you can enter the next round, you'll have a great chance to enter the trial tower. The man with the flat nose, who had been ready for a long time, was excited. As soon as he heard the start of the battle, he rushed forward. The third-tier king exploded with speed. He quickly closed in on Gray. The combination of metal and poison elemental abilities formed a poisonous giant metal knife. It was very powerful as it slashed towards Gray. Whoosh! There was an ear-piercing sound in the air. Just the swing of the knife created a strong wind that was like a sharp knife cutting through the air. If the stone of the stage had not been reinforced by a high-level hardening rune, the stage would have been full of crisscrossing scratches. The stage might even have collapsed from the aftershock. This was a fourth-tier king attack. It was definitely enough to defeat a second-tier king. The man with the flat nose was excited. It was as if he could already see the trial tower waving at him. Boom! A figure flew out and slammed into the defensive barrier with a loud thud. He's too ruthless. He knew that the guy from the Leopold clan was only a second-tier king, yet he still went all out. He even used a hybrid ability. That's a little too much. Seeing that someone had smashed into the defensive barrier, a disciple of the top clan spoke with a tone that said, I'm just being fair. However, no matter how one looked at it, there was a hint of jealousy in his voice. Naturally, he wasn't trying to fight for justice for Gray. He was merely envious of the man with the flat nose's luck, so he deliberately made things difficult for him and made him feel even more depressed. That's right. After all, we're all disciples of top clans. To be so ruthless, it's really Another disciple of a top family understood tacitly and was very willing to cooperate. However, halfway through his words, he was stunned and his expression turned into one of shock. No, the one who flew out isn't the Leopold clan's disciple. On the battle stage, a black-haired young man was standing calmly, while a man with a slightly collapsed nose was lying on the ground. He was in so much pain that he couldn't get up immediately. The one who was standing calmly was clearly the descendant of the Leopold clan. How can this be? The one who flew out is actually the descendant of the Retiz clan? A fourth-tier king couldn't even block a single attack. Just how strong is this guy from the Leopold clan? Many of the noble disciples were shocked at first, but then their expressions turned serious. This was especially true for those who had successfully entered the next round but weren't very confident in their own strength. Their expressions were even more serious. They had originally thought that the opponent was only a second-tier king, but they didn't expect that the opponent would suddenly explode with such power that even a fourth-tier king couldn't block a single attack. To be able to defeat a fourth-tier king with a single attack, just how strong was the opponent? Was he still hiding his strength? Although they thought that the possibility was very small, since the opponent was only a disciple of a bottom-tier clan. Only those who had watched the battle between Gray and Miguel Villa didn't show any surprise on their faces. However, they couldn't help but feel serious in their hearts. The opponent was definitely a strong competitor. See, I told you that this guy was hiding his strength. You just didn't believe me. Miguel Villa was so excited that he was about to cry. He finally had a chance to retaliate against all the grievances he had suffered before. It wasn't that he was weak, but rather that the opponent was too strong. Although this was a huge blow to him, it was still better than being wronged. How can this be? How can this guy be so strong? At this moment, the man with the flat nose was just as devastated as Miguel Villa. He originally thought that he had picked up the weakest opponent and could easily enter the next round. But he didn't think that it would be a treacherous guy who had hidden his strength. To be able to defeat him, who was a fourth-stage king, in a single blow, meant that the other party's combat power had definitely reached the magic light rank. How could this be the weakest opponent? Even among the remaining opponents, this person was probably one of the strongest. Pa pa pa. The sound of footsteps approached. He raised his head and immediately saw the descendant of the Leopold clan walking towards him. His opponent's speed was neither fast nor slow, as if he was taking a stroll. However, the pressure he felt was immense, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. I admit defeat. Without hesitation, he quickly admitted defeat. If he had the chance to win, he would definitely fight with his opponent, even if it meant that he would be seriously injured. After all, the quota for the trial tower was just too important. However, in front of such an absolute difference in strength, he obviously had no hope of winning. Naturally, he wouldn't stupidly fight until he was seriously injured. As he walked down from the battle stage, Gray noticed that many gazes were focused on him. Some were curious, some were shocked, some were fearful. There were all sorts of gazes. It was obvious that the strength that Gray had displayed was enough to make most of the people present take him seriously. Only the descendant of the Ngumo, Lopez, and Mandy families didn't have much of a change in their expressions. Even though Gray had displayed such strength, they were still confident that they would be the ones to win. "Brother, I knew that you would win." Avery Lenini greeted Gray as if they had been old friends for many years. The corner of Gray's mouth twitched. He really couldn't deal with such a thick-skinned guy. If he was an enemy, he would have beaten him up or even killed him directly. However, someone like this, who was thick-skinned enough to approach him without any hostility, was really a headache to deal with. Number 21 and number 22, please come on stage. On the battle stage, the last battle began. Both of them were at the third stage of the King's stage, and their combat strength had reached the fourth stage. Neither of them had an absolute advantage. After more than 10 minutes of fighting, the man in charge of the battle finally stopped the battle and ended it. The final victory was awarded to a young man with a tall physique. Although he had defeated his opponent and entered the next round, his injuries were not light. Looking at the situation, Although it wasn't to the extent that he couldn't fight, his combat strength had definitely been damaged. Rest for an hour, and then we will begin the last round of drawing lots. The middle-aged man in charge of the battle walked onto the battle stage and said, "An hour's time was naturally not enough for the blood power to be recovered naturally. However, the clans present were all top clans, and they naturally didn't lack high-grade recovery potions. An hour's time was enough for everyone to recover their blood power. Moreover, if the injuries weren't too serious, even the injuries on the body would be enough to recover. They really are willing to put in a lot of effort." Beside Gray, Avery Lenini muttered softly. Gray followed his gaze and immediately saw a tall old man beside the young man who had won the last battle but was heavily injured. The old man took out a green crystal bottle containing a magical potion. The words, "Would Speaker," were engraved on the surface. Because of Aubrey's constant influence, Gray recognized this potion. This was a potion more powerful than high-grade recovery potions. Its level was as high as level 4, the same level as the Blood Moon potion that Gray was currently treating as a treasure. From this, it wasn't difficult to see the value of this potion. An hour's time passed by as many top clan's disciples raced against time. Of course, the disciples of the 3 strongest clans, or Gray, who had defeated their opponents in a single blow, were naturally very relaxed. Their bodies were always in peak condition and naturally didn't need to race against time to recover. All right, let's begin the last round of the battle. The middle-aged man from the Chaos Temple, who was in charge of the qualification selection, walked onto the battle stage and looked at Gray and the others who had successfully entered the last round. The opponents are still determined by drawing lots, but the difference this time is that the person who draws a bye can choose any one of the 5 winners to challenge. If he wins, he can replace his position. A total of 11 people, including Gray, stepped forward to draw a number. Gray glanced at the number in his hand, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He put away the number and walked down the battle stage. "How is it? What number did you draw? Who's your opponent?" Avery Lenini came forward and asked with a curious look. Gray spread out the number in his hand in the palm of his hand and let the other party see it. The other party took a glance and almost jumped up in the next moment. You're so lucky." He gasped for a long breath and then cried out strangely, "Damn, this is too good." At this moment, the number on the jade card lying in Gray's hand was 11, which meant that there was no opponent to advance to the next round. And this number was definitely the number that all the disciples who participated in the competition wanted to get the most. Even the disciples of the 3 strongest clans were tempted. Although they were confident that their strength surpassed everyone, if the disciples of the 3 clans encountered each other, it was bound to be a bitter battle. In the end, one of them would be eliminated, so this number was also attractive to them. 15_15674/ Chapter 673. No, I can't be jealous. How can I be jealous when I'm so broad-minded? Avery Lenini took a deep breath exaggeratedly, his face full of envy and jealousy. In the entire competition, there would be a total of 2 openings, and of these 2 openings, the one with the highest value would undoubtedly be the last one. The first openings would only allow one to enter the next round, but it wouldn't be of much help to the competition for a spot in the trial tower. However, the last openings were different. Although one could not directly obtain a place in the trial tower, they could freely choose their opponents. They did not need to be stronger than all 5, but only needed to be stronger than the weakest of the 5 to qualify. This naturally increased their chances greatly. Moreover, the person who got the bye was waiting for the exhausted ones, while the other 5 had already gone through a fierce battle. It was very likely that they were already heavily injured, so their chances of winning were naturally higher. Therefore, this last bye was definitely the most valuable one. Number 11 was actually taken by him. Isn't his luck too good? Damn, why don't I have such luck? This guy is the one who really stepped in shit. Although they did not see the number in Gray's hand, the representatives of their respective families were naturally not fools. They easily guessed that number 11 had fallen into Gray's hands, and their faces were filled with envy. If they could snatch the number, they would definitely do so without hesitation. The strongest battle power is at the first level of magic light, and he even got a free pass. I'm afraid one of the 5 places in the trial tower will belong to him. At this moment, even the disciples of the 3 strongest clans couldn't help but look at Gray. The Lopez clan's disciple, George Lopez, said with slight envy in his eyes, "This is really unexpected. I'm afraid that before this, no family would have thought that the Leopold family would come this far, and even possibly obtain a place in the trial tower." Blanca Manti looked at Gray with a trace of interest. Whether in terms of strength or luck, he was already worthy of her attention. Although the Manti family was one of the 3 strongest families, it did not mean that they did not need allies. After all, there were 2 other families that could contend with the Manti family. As the leader of the next generation of the Manti family, she naturally needed to find allies among her peers, and this man seemed to be a good choice. Although his family was at the bottom of the top families, with his potential, he was sure to become Annihilation class. In the end, he would not be weak among Annihilation classes. A person like that would be a good ally. Leopold family? Landry Ngomo, a disciple of the Ngomo clan, could not help but look at Gray. Putting aside the clan's strength, Gray's strength and luck were really good. Number 1 and number 2, please come on stage. Immediately, 2 people walked up the stage. One of the 2 people was an old acquaintance of Gray's, Miguel Villa. His opponent's luck seemed to be good. Although he did not draw an empty number, his 2 opponents were not very strong. After a fierce battle, he defeated his opponent and successfully made it to the last round. Gray looked at his opponent. It was a tall young man who had won the last match. After taking the wood speaker potion, all the wounds on his body had healed. It was impossible to see the wounds on his body from the outside. However, his face was slightly pale, indicating that he was not in his best condition. This guy's luck is as good as yours. Avery Lenini curled his lips in dissatisfaction. In the previous fight, Miguel Villa had not been too badly injured. After taking the medicine, he had recovered. Now, he was facing an opponent who had not yet recovered. His chances of winning were very high. Start. As the host announced the start of the fight, Miguel Villa's black and white spear emitted a cold aura. A large amount of cold aura spread towards the tall young man. The tall young man was wearing a pair of boxing gloves. A halo dissipated from the gloves. Suddenly, a large amount of black liquid appeared around him. The black liquid turned into thick water whips and whizzed towards Miguel Villa. The tall young man's ability was also a mixed ability of 2 elements. It was an ability formed by combining water and poison abilities. It was extremely corrosive. Chi-Chi, the black corrosive liquid, turned into water whips. They were powerful and heavy, as if they could split a mountain in half. They quickly rushed towards Miguel Villa. Miguel Villa either used cold aura to freeze them or used flames to burn them. He was also waiting for an opportunity to attack the tall young man. This was an extremely intense fight. At the beginning, both sides used their full strength. Their methods were extremely vicious, as if the opponent was a mortal enemy. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were life and death enemies. The trial tower was an opportunity. Not only could they increase their strength, but they could also obtain other benefits. With such an opportunity, they would definitely be able to go further in the future. But anyone who blocked their path and prevented them from obtaining opportunities was naturally a mortal enemy. So the fight between both sides was very bloody from the beginning. In order to defeat their opponent, they did not hesitate to exchange injuries. Soon, many wounds appeared on both of their bodies. However, the tall young man had not fully recovered from his previous injuries. In the end, Miguel Villa obtained victory. I won. I've obtained the right to enter the trial tower. At first, Miguel Villa didn't dare to believe that he had obtained the qualifications to enter the Tower of Trials. He was wild with joy, as if he had gone mad, as if he had suddenly lost his mind. Luckily, the people below the stage, especially the younger generation, understood his actions. If they had obtained the right to enter the trial tower, they would have been as wild with joy as him. Under the urging of the host, Miguel Villa quickly walked down the stage under everyone's envious gazes. On the other hand, the tall young man's face was filled with loneliness. He lowered his head and walked down the stage with the help of his companions. His heart was filled with self-blame and disappointment. Number 3 and number 4, please come up. Number 5 and number 6, please come up. The battle continued. Just like Miguel Villa, those who won were wild with joy, and those who lost were filled with disappointment. Only the disciples of the 3 strongest families did not lose their composure after winning. Even so, one could still see faint smiles on their faces. In the end, the 5 battles ended. 5 people who obtained the right to enter the trial tower were born. The disciples of the 3 strongest families did not encounter each other. All of them had obtained the right to enter the trial tower. Gray also took out the number 11 jade tag and handed it to the host. After the host checked the tag and confirmed that it was correct, he nodded and said, "You can challenge any one of them. You can challenge any one of the 5 of them. If you can win, then the qualifications of that person will be replaced by you." Gray looked at the 5 winners and swept his gaze across them. George Lopez was handsome and had a strong aura. Such a person was destined to be the main character no matter where he went. Landry Ngomo looked ordinary. It would be hard to find him among normal people. However, such a person possessed strength that was rarely seen among the younger generation. Blanca Mandy's beauty was unparalleled. Just by standing there casually, it was enough to make people's hearts beat faster. Their gazes could not help but fall on her. Gray's gaze swept across the 5 of them and finally landed on Miguel Villa. He did not move his gaze away. When Gray went up the stage to choose his opponent, Miguel Villa already had a bad feeling. Now that he was being stared at by Gray, the bad feeling in his heart became even stronger. Gray's lips curled up slightly as he spoke. "I choose to challenge him." Gray pointed at Miguel Villa. With his power, he was confident that no matter who he chose among the 5, even if it was a member of the 3 big families, he would be the one to win. However, he did not plan to do so because there was no need to. He could easily win, so why would he choose a difficult opponent? Plus, with the grudge between him and Miguel Villa, if he could make Miguel Villa lose the right to enter the trial tower, he would be happy to see that happen. You are purposely picking on me." Seeing that Gray had really chosen to challenge him, Miguel Villa was so angry that his face turned green. He angrily pointed at Gray. His eyes looked as if he wanted to eat Gray. It was not just him. The Villa family's annihilation elite, a tall and skinny old man, coldly grunted. "Mister, he is purposely picking on the Villa family. This is not fair to the Villa family." Aside from that, the other members of the Villa family looked at Gray with an unfriendly expression. Gray's expression didn't change in the slightest as he faced the furious and ferocious gazes of the Wajia clan members. Instead, he looked at the man hosting the battle and asked, "Can I challenge him?" "You can. Anyone of 5 can challenge him. He is no exception." The one who spoke was the middle-aged man who was hosting the fight. He looked at the Villa family elder and spoke with a deeper meaning. "Challenging is the right given to you by the Chaos Holy Palace. No one has the right to stop you. Anyone who tries to stop you is a challenge to the Chaos Holy Palace. However, the opponent you are challenging has just fought. This challenge will be arranged for tomorrow morning. Today's fight will end here." Gray did not have any objections to this. Giving the opponent a night was not a big deal. With the opponent's power, even if he recovered to his peak condition, he would not be able to beat him. The reason he had chosen him was just to vent his anger. Look, this is the price of being arrogant. He has lost the right to enter the trial tower. Many pairs of gloating eyes looked at Miguel Villa. They looked in the direction of the Villa family. Some of the families who had a bad relationship with the Villa family did not care about the Villa family members' stares. They just lectured their own children. Their relationship with the Villa family was already very bad. They did not care if their relationship with the Villa family worsened because of this. Aside from that, among the many eyes that looked at the Villa family, there were a few pairs of eyes that were filled with gratitude. Among the 5 people who had obtained the right to enter the trial tower, aside from the children of the 3 strongest families in Miguel Villa, there was another person from his family. With his power, If he was challenged by Gray, his chances of winning were not high. Unexpectedly, Miguel Villa had provoked Gray not long ago, which allowed him to escape. Chapter 674. It was nighttime. In the living room of a luxurious hotel in Chaos City, the Wagia family gathered together. Everyone's face was gloomy. It was so gloomy that water could drip from it. They had been targeted by the Leopold family, mocked by the enemy family, and laughed at by the other top families. The Wagia family had lost all their face. One can imagine how they were feeling. Miguel Wagia, who had been targeted by Gray, clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. He tasted blood in his mouth. He had bitten his lip until it bled. A brown-haired, middle-aged man looked at Miguel Wagia with a pained expression. "Elder, you know the strength of that brat from the Leopold family. Could it be that we can only watch as Miguel loses the qualifications to enter the Tower of Trials? How about I?" He did not finish his sentence, but from a murderous look in his eyes, everyone knew what he meant. He wanted to injure or kill that kid from the Leopold family, so he could not participate in the fight the next day. The tall, skinny old man's eyebrows were all white. After hearing what he said, he frowned even harder. "Don't do anything stupid. If something happens to him, everyone will know it is the Wagia family. Although Fod became an annihilation class through some weird means, he is still an annihilation class. You are no match for him." Then what do we do? With Miguel's power, I am afraid he will have to reach the 4th stage of King class to defeat that kid from the Leopold family. The brown-haired, middle-aged man did not want to give up. What else can we do? We have to give up. After all, this is all Miguel's fault. If he loses the right to enter the trial tower, he can only blame himself. A man in his 50s coldly laughed. Many families would give birth to multiple factions, and this was the case in the Wagia family as well. The brown-haired middle-aged man represented the Patriarch's faction, while the 50-year-old man represented the Patriarch's faction. When there were outsiders present, they could temporarily put down their conflicts and unite against the outside world. But when there were only their own people, the conflicts would be reignited. Now that there was an opportunity to attack the family head, he immediately began to mock and ridicule them. Although this was all Miguel's fault, they have crossed the line. This is not just Miguel's problem. It is related to the entire Wagia family's reputation. The brown-haired middle-aged man frowned and retorted. Is it related to the Wagia family's reputation? That wasn't caused by Miguel. I think Miguel should be punished. I suggest cutting off his supply of resources for 3 years. The man in his 50s took the opportunity to add insult to injury. "Darko, don't go overboard." The brown-haired middle-aged man was furious, and his eyes became unfriendly. "All right, quiet down, all of you," the tall and skinny old man scolded. His majestic aura spread out. The brown-haired middle-aged man and the 50-year-old man trembled. They knew that they had angered the old man, so they quickly quieted down. The tall and skinny old man glanced at everyone before looking at Miguel Wagia. "Just do your best to obtain the right to enter the trial tower. If you really can't, just admit defeat. But don't worry, this debt will be settled with the Leopold family sooner or later. All right, let's disperse." The crowd dispersed one after another. The brown-haired middle-aged man returned to his room. Hesitation and conflict appeared on his face, and in the end, it turned into a painful expression. The power of blood touched the rune space bag. Suddenly, a purple crystal bottle containing a magic potion appeared in his hand. The words "Star Potion" were engraved on the surface of the potion. The Star Potion was a type of potion that was purple in color. However, within the purple, there were specks of silver light. Because it looked like a sky full of stars, it was called the Star Potion. This was a type of magic potion that could increase one's strength. Its effect was similar to the Blood Moon Potion, and it was also a level 4 potion. Originally, he had planned to keep it for himself, but now that Miguel Wagia had encountered such a situation, he finally decided to take it out after some hesitation. He quickly left the hotel and returned after an hour. However, the Star Potion in his hand had already been diluted into 3 small bottles. He knocked on Miguel Wagia's door. "Star Potion, this is the Star Potion." Seeing the potion in the brown-haired, middle-aged man's hand, Miguel Wagia's eyes lit up with desire. A A bottle of star potion was equivalent to several years of training. Naturally, he would desire something like this. Unfortunately, in the family, these things were given priority to the upper echelons of the family. After all, they were the pillars of the Wejia family. To be precise, this is a diluted version of the star potion. You won't be able to withstand the full potion. Hurry up and take it. When the time comes, you will definitely be able to break through to the 4th stage of the king level. You should be able to fight against him. Seeing Miguel Wejia's excited face, the brown-haired middle-aged man rubbed Miguel Wejia's head and smiled. "Thank you, second uncle," Miguel Wejia said gratefully. He naturally understood that this bottle of star potion must have been given by his second uncle from his own training resources. He was very grateful for this. He even felt that this second uncle in front of him treated him better than his father. "All right, don't disappoint me." The brown-haired middle-aged man patted Miguel Wejia's head and left his room. He was Miguel Wejia's second uncle, but in reality, he was Miguel Wejia's father. Miguel Wejia was his and his sister-in-law's son. Of course, only the two of them knew about this. Even Miguel Wejia didn't know. The next day, near the Chaos Temple's battle stage, Gray's group of 3 and the Wejia family's group appeared here. Their goal was naturally to fight for the trial tower spot. These two groups of people weren't the only ones here. Other than them, there were many people from other top clans. They were all here to watch the show. There were many top clans that had bad relationships with the Wejia family. Their goal was naturally to see the Wejia family make a fool of themselves. There would be no exceptions to the result of this battle. The winner would definitely be the disciple of the Leopold family who had reached the magic light level. They had grudges with the Wejia family, so they were naturally happy to see the Wejia family lose the battle and lose the right to enter the trial tower. Just you wait. I'll give you a surprise. Looking at the pairs of eyes that were obviously waiting to see a joke, Miguel Wejia coldly snorted. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a cold smile. What was about to happen would definitely give these people a big surprise. After using the star potion, he had successfully advanced. The current him was no longer a 3rd stage king, but a 4th stage king, just like the guy from the Leopold family. With the difference in stage, he knew that he definitely wasn't a match for the guy from the Leopold family. However, now that there was no longer a difference in stage, he naturally didn't think that he would lose to the guy from the Leopold family. Damn, how did this guy change so much in one night? He actually became arrogant. Brother, you have to ruthlessly beat that guy up later. Beat him up until even his father can't recognize him. Seeing Miguel Wejia like this, Avery Lenini moved closer to Gray and said fiercely, "He's indeed a bit different from yesterday." Gray looked at Miguel Wejia with a bit of surprise. Unlike yesterday, Miguel Wejia's body was filled with arrogance and confidence. Even when their gazes met, the other party didn't look away. Instead, he coldly smiled and stared back. Could it be that guy has some kind of backing? Avery Lenini frowned. The other party's attitude was like he was provoking Gray. A person who had lost to Gray in the past dared to provoke Gray like this. It must have been because he had some kind of backing that gave him the confidence to fight against Gray. Could it be that guy's level has a breakthrough? Avery Lenini's heart tightened. He couldn't help but look at Gray with a worried gaze. Miguel Wejia, who was a 3rd stage king, was naturally not Gray's opponent. However, if he had broken through to the 4th stage king level, then it would be hard to say. He also had a dual elemental ability, so his strongest combat power was no weaker than Gray's. Backing? Gray chuckled. His face was still calm. Unless his opponent had some kind of backing that allowed him to become as powerful as an Annihilation class elite overnight, there was no way he could beat him. Even if his opponent became as powerful as an Annihilation class elite overnight, who would win and who would lose would only be known after the fight. This seems to be getting interesting. Among the families that were watching the fight, the 3 top families were all there. George Lopez of the Lopez family looked very interested. He could see the confidence that Miguel Wejia was showing. For him to be so confident at a time like this, he must have had some kind of backing. That made him even more interested. He thought this was a fight that had already been decided. Now, it seemed like the outcome was going to be interesting. A fight like this was going to be much more interesting to watch. Sister, why do I feel like Miguel Wagia is different from yesterday? A 13 or 14-year-old boy with a bit of baby fat asked Blanca Mandy with confusion. Miguel Wagia must have taken a star potion and had a breakthrough. Blanca Mandy looked at Miguel Wagia. She lowered her voice so that only the two of them could hear. The brown-haired, middle-aged man had left the hotel to find an alchemist to dilute the star potion. He had been seen by the Manti family. After some investigation, she had a guess. Now, seeing how confident Miguel Wagia was, her guess was confirmed. He must have taken a star potion and had a breakthrough. Otherwise, he would not have been so confident. Seeing Miguel Wagia, who clearly has some kind of backing, you do not seem to be worried. What kind of backing do you have? Blanca Mandy looked at Gray, who saw the cocky Miguel Wagia, and did not change his expression. She looked curious and expectant. Chapter 675. Get on the stage. As the Chaos Temple's host spoke, Gray and Miguel Waika walked up the stage under everyone's gaze and stood on both sides of the stage. The two looked at each other. Miguel Waika's gaze was as cold as a wolf's as it locked onto Gray's body. The coldness in his eyes seemed to want to freeze Gray. Gray's gaze, on the other hand, remained calm from start to finish. Even when he was stared at by Miguel Waika's wolf-like gaze, there was no change in his expression. Begin. The stage's defensive barrier rose up as the host announced the start of the battle. Hula. Just as the host announced the start of the battle, Miguel Waika's figure disappeared from where he stood, turning into a blur as he quickly rushed towards Gray. Just by moving through the air, he created a violent sonic boom, causing the air around the stage to violently tremble. It was easy to imagine how fast he was right now. The stage was more than 1,000 square meters, and the furthest distance between the two sides was only 40 meters. With his terrifying speed, he didn't even need an instant to cross the distance and appear beside Gray. Boom! The black and white spear's tip was covered in crimson flames that could instantly melt a bronze-ranked magic weapon. The spear viciously stabbed towards Gray. This kind of speed, to be able to become a member of a top family. Even if he was just a young disciple, he would definitely have extraordinary knowledge. Not to mention, there was no lack of people from the older generation among these people. So when Miguel Waika burst forth with the speed of a fourth-stage king, they immediately noticed the abnormality. Aside from a small number of people who faintly guessed, most of them couldn't help but feel shocked. They understood that Miguel Waika must have already reached the fourth-stage king rank, the same realm as the Leopold family disciple. While they were surprised, they couldn't help but think that Miguel Wagia might really be able to defeat the Leopold family's disciple and obtain a spot to enter the Tower of Trials. This caused them to be shocked. They originally thought that this was an undisputed battle, but they didn't expect such a huge reversal. You didn't expect this, did you? The long spear pierced straight towards Gray. Under the terrifying power, violent ripples appeared in the air. Looking at Gray, who was about to be pierced by the spear, a sinister smile appeared on Miguel's face, and he felt excited and pleased in his heart. Before he stepped onto the battle platform, he already had a plan. He would suddenly burst out with the speed of a fourth-level king that he had never possessed before. He would definitely be able to catch his opponent off guard. As long as he was stabbed by the spear, his opponent would be severely injured. Since Wushang was at the fourth tier of the king level, he would definitely win. Advancing to the fourth tier of the king realm is what you're counting on. Gray's eyes were filled with mockery as he stared at the incoming spear that had reached the level of magic light. From Miguel Waika's arrogant attitude, he guessed that Miguel Waika probably had something to rely on. Just as he expected, Miguel Waika did indeed have something to rely on. His realm had actually risen from the third tier of the king level to the fourth tier of the king level in one night. Rising from the third tier of the king level to the fourth tier of the king level was an extremely huge increase. It was enough to raise Miguel Waika's strongest battle power from the king level to the magic light level. However, even if his strongest battle power was raised to the magic light level, it was still not enough in front of him. Hualala! Just as the long spear was about to pierce Gray, an even bigger movement than the long spear suddenly appeared. A black fog appeared like a rolling dark cloud. It surged out from Gray's body and engulfed the long spear. Chi-Chi, Chi-Chi. The long spear that was surrounded by red flames seemed to have been attacked by a flood under the black fog. The red flames were instantly extinguished. To be more precise, they were extinguished by the black fog. Not only that, the black fog quickly rushed towards Miguel Huayca, who was holding the long spear. Bang! There was no time to dodge. Miguel Huayca was already engulfed by the black fog. He was engulfed by the black fog and couldn't help but slide backwards. Puff! As if he was hit by a huge wave, Miguel Huayca felt a sharp pain in his body. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and the bones in his body started to crack. Under the cover of the black mist, the parts of his armor that were not covered by the black mist instantly became a bloody mess. Even the armor on his body was rapidly decaying under the black mist. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before Miguel Huayca would be killed by the black fog in just a few moments. Puff! Just then, a figure quickly rushed into the black fog. It was the man who was hosting the battle. It was unknown what realm he was at. His body's defense was extremely terrifying. Even under the power of the black fog, not a single wound could be seen on his body. He quickly grabbed Miguel Huayca and left the black fog in a flash. The Leopold family wins. With one hand holding the heavily injured Miguel Huayca, the man who was hosting the battle looked at Gray and announced. He was born in the Chaos Holy Palace and was an annihilation class. He was very knowledgeable. Normal things would not surprise him. However, when he saw the black fog that the Leopold family disciple used, he couldn't help but be surprised. From the increase in power, the black fog should be a 3-element mixed power. 3-element mixed power. Even in the Chaos Holy Palace, it was rare to see a blood skill of this level. The choice of blood skill depended on one's adaptability. If one did not have the talent to practice mixed blood skills and forcefully practiced mixed blood skills, the consequences would be very serious. There was a chance that the blood implantation would fail and one would be heavily injured or even die on the spot. Even if the implantation was successful, the training might slow down or not improve at all due to adaptability. For someone who was not from the Chaos Holy Palace, to have a 3-element mixed power surprised him. Miguel Huayca lost again. He lost just like that. It's the same as last time. He defeated Miguel Huayca in one hit. Below the stage, the people from the top families looked at each other. They could not help but look at each other. Seeing Miguel Huayca display the speed of a 4-stage king class, they were shocked. They felt that the battle was no longer one-sided. They even thought that Miguel Huayca might win. After all, he was not prepared for it. They did not expect that, just as they thought that Miguel Huayca lost immediately. It was the same as last time. He was defeated without being able to block a single hit. 3-element mixed power, and his fighting power has reached the 2nd stage of magic light. Blanca Mandy's beautiful face looked serious. George Lopez's interested face turned serious. Landrienne Gumeau's eyes flashed. Whether it was the 3-element mixed power or the 2nd stage of magic light fighting power, it was enough for the 3 of them to take it seriously. Mixed power was the ability to fight above one's level, but it was not only that. It was also a sign of potential. In the Annihilation class, increasing one's level was directly related to the type of power one had. The more mixed powers one had, the further one could go in the Annihilation class. Considering the extreme danger of implanting a 2nd type of blood pulse, someone who had 3 elements at the beginning, even if it was not worth it to have a 2nd type of blood pulse, would still be able to train to a very high level. His potential was naturally very high. Their opponent's 2nd stage of magic light fighting power was enough to make them take him seriously. Although they were still confident that if they fought, they would win, without a doubt, their opponent's fighting power was enough to threaten them. Miguel, the defensive barrier was removed. The brown-haired, middle-aged man from the Huayca family flashed and appeared on the battle stage. He took Miguel Huayca from the hands of the host. He saw that Miguel Huayca's body was covered in blood and many of his bones were broken. He had already fainted. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he locked on a Gray. Are you ignoring the Chaos Holy Palace? The host of the Chaos Holy Palace coldly grunted. He looked at the brown-haired, middle-aged man coldly. If the other party wanted to take revenge in private, he would not have cared. Even if they fought to the death, the Chaos Holy Palace would not have interfered. Showing such a strong, murderous intent on the battle stage made him very unhappy. If the other party attacked the Leopold family student there, the Chaos Holy Palace would lose face. After all, this was a fight hosted by the Chaos Holy Palace. I am sorry. I just lost control of my emotions. Feeling the scary presence of the host, the brown-haired, middle-aged man was shocked. His opponent was an Annihilation class elite. He quickly put away his murderous intent and apologized. The host did not say anything. He looked away and made an announcement. The student of the Leopold family has won the challenge. According to the rules, the right to enter the trial tower that originally belonged to the Wyka family will now belong to the Leopold family. Hearing the host's announcement, the people of the top-class families all looked strange. The right to enter the trial tower had really gone to the Leopold family, which was at the bottom of the top-class families. Maybe we can let the students of the family try to make friends with them. Some of the top-class families looked at Gray. They were thinking, although the Leopold family was at the bottom of the top-class families, the new generation of students had a lot of potential. If they could grow up and not die, the Leopold family's power would not be weaker than the families they belonged to. They had the potential to invest in them. They really have the right to enter the trial tower. Avery Lenini looked very surprised. He knew how difficult it was for a family that was at the bottom of the top-class families to obtain the right to enter the trial tower. He looked at Fod and Kesha, expecting to see ecstasy on their faces. But to his surprise, he did not see the slightest bit of excitement on their faces. There was only calmness, as if it was a matter of course for them to obtain the qualifications for the trial tower. It made him feel helpless. The Leopold family had obtained the right to enter the trial tower, but he, an outsider, was the happiest. Was there something wrong with this?